Good morning and welcome to the California Cradle-to-Career Data Systems Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting. My name is Shannon Serrato. I'm the Director of Engagement at Cradle-to-Career. Today's meeting is held in person at the Cradle-to-Career Data Systems office at 400 R
Hola,
Street.
buenos días. Bienvenidos a la nueva reunión de Cradle-to-Career de Community.
Jeanette, just one moment. We're going to put you in the Spanish room. Thank you all for your patience. Okay, today's meeting is held in person at the Cradle-to-Career Data Systems office at 400 R Street in Sacramento. I want to welcome and thank the members of the public who have joined us here, both in person and virtually. So I want to make a quick note about interpretation services. As you just heard, we have Spanish interpreters with us who will be helping us interpret the meeting. As a reminder for all members speaking today, we ask that when you introduce yourselves, please say your name slowly as well as your job title or affiliation, and then pause briefly before proceeding with your comments. I will begin. Shannon Serrato, Director of Engagement at Cradle-to-Career. Thank you very much to Jeanette Hernandez and Aldo Renteria, who will be interpreting for us today. To listen to comments given in Spanish, please select the globe icon at the bottom of the screen that says Interpretation, then select Language Interpretation Audio in your language, such as Spanish. You will then hear a live rendering of comments in Spanish. I will pause for a moment to give our interpreter Aldo a moment to translate.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Appreciate it. Muy buenos días a todos ustedes. Gracias por acompañarnos a la reunión de hoy. En esta reunión se proporcionan servicios de interpretación. En la parte inferior de su pantalla, a la brevedad, usted va a ver un icono en forma de un mundo. Favor de presionar ese mundo y elegir el idioma de su preferencia. En este caso sería español. Una vez que lo elija, presionar el icono nuevamente para que ponga audio original en silencio. Eso le permitirá escuchar el audio con la interpretación en vivo de los intérpretes. Si tiene alguna pregunta, alguna duda, favor de alzar su mano o escribirlo en el chat y con mucho gusto lo apoyaremos. Que tenga una buena reunión y cualquier cosa, favor de acercarse con nosotros. Gracias. Shannon, back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aldo, and thank you, Jeanette, for your help today. As we begin, we acknowledge this virtual meeting is taking place throughout the unceded territory of California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. I'm joining today from Sacramento, the traditional land of the Maidu, Miwok, and Nisenan people, whose presence, past, present, and future, we honor and respect. We will now pause for a moment to reflect. We recognize the ancestral land on which we are collectively gathered and our responsibilities to support and foster learning through the dissemination of knowledge, consistent with the Cradle-to-Career Data Systems work to advance equity. We hope this acknowledgement encourages others to think about what it means to occupy space on Indigenous lands, and we invite attendees to learn more about the ancestral lands on which they reside at native-land.ca. So before we dive into today's work, let's take a look at what is in front of us. In total, there are 16 items on today's agenda. Our agenda, which is posted on the C2C website, specifically notes the agenda items that we will be opening to public comment. Today, members of the Community Engagement Advisory Board will be voting on one agenda item, and we will open it up for member dialogue on 12 items. In total, there will be 4 opportunities for the public to engage with the advisory board. If you're a member of the public here in Sacramento and would like to make a comment, I request that you complete a speaker slip so that I can call on you by name at the appropriate time and that the record of this meeting can be made full and complete. However, speaker slips are voluntary. Please give the speaker slips to Sofia Aguilar. Sophia, can you please identify yourself for the audience? Thank you so much. So we will do our best to call upon everyone who has supplied a slip for an agenda item and recognize those who wish to make a last-minute comment. In addition, we may have members of the public who are joining us via Zoom. Please raise your hand to signal that you would like to make a comment. We will first take comments in Sacramento, then we will open it up to comments via Zoom. Although we traditionally allot 2 minutes per public comment, if we have 10 or more people who would like to comment on an agenda item, we will reduce speaking times to 1 minute to accommodate all speakers. We have a very full agenda today and plan to end today's meeting at 3:30 p.m. We anticipate breaking for a 60-minute lunch around 11:55 a.m. and 2 5-minute breaks, one in the morning around 11:10 a.m. and one in the afternoon around 3 p.m. Before I call this meeting to order, I have a few reminders and updates. First, I ask that all members of the advisory board and the public please silence your phones. We also ask that those in the room be as quiet as possible for accessibility purposes, as background noise can interfere with the interpretation services. As a reminder for members of the public who have joined us here in Sacramento, copies of meeting materials are available to you in the back left corner of the room. Additionally, you may notice board members accessing their laptops, phones, or other devices during the meeting. They are using their devices to access board meeting materials that are in electronic format. I also ask that when members of the advisory board offer a comment, that they say their name before speaking. The camera angles can be tricky, and we would like this meeting to be as transparent as possible for those who are joining us virtually. I appreciate your assistance with that today. And lastly, today's meeting will be run according to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act as required by law. I would like to call the meeting to order at 10:07 a.m. and ask that Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez please call the roll.
Good morning, Member Chang,
Present.
Member Countryman Quiros, Member Gamboa, Member Gonzalez, Member Gottlieb, Member Johnson, Member Jones, Member Khosravi, Member Largo,
Present.
Member Lopez Valdez, Member Lopez, Member Navarez, Member Nguyen, Member Rodriguez, Member Takagi, Member Viveros Walton. For the clarity of the record, we have 12 members present. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. We will now move on to agenda item 2, the swearing in of our new advisory board member. So at the August 14th, 2024 governing board meeting, the governing board appointed 4 new community engagement advisory board members to serve 3-year terms through 2027. The governing board also appointed 4 community engagement advisory board runner-up candidates. At the October 16th, 2024 Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting, Executive Director Bates swore in 3 Community Engagement Advisory Board members. In the fall of 2024, 1 advisory board member stepped down from their position. So today we will be welcoming and swearing in Marissa Johnson, new Community Engagement Advisory Board member. Her term will be through 2027. I would now like to invite Mary Ann Bates, Executive Director, to administer the oath to our new member here today.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And Member Johnson, you can join me over here in front of the seal. And we're also delighted to have your family and supporters here today, which is just wonderful. So what we'll do is you can put your left hand on the Constitution and raise your right hand. And then I'm going to state the words first. You're going to repeat after me. Ready to go?
Yes.
All right. So you're going to start by I and then state your full name.
I, Marissa Gloria Johnson,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I'll bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without
any mental reservation
any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Director Bates, for administering the oath. I would now like to ask our new member, Member Johnson, to provide a quick introduction to their fellow members and to the public.
I don't always speak loudly, so I'll do my best. But nice to meet all of you, and thank you to everyone who showed up to support me today. I'm Marissa Johnson, or Marisa Johnson, whatever's more comfortable for you. And I am the Director of Policy Impact at the Campaign for College Opportunity, where I've been for about 5 years on and off. In there, I do a lot of work on policy implementation as it relates to higher education. And so I get to interact with a lot of practitioners, students, and also system leaders. And so I hope to, bring those voices into the room with me, but I also hope to bring some of my personal experience. There's 3 generations of my family with me when I took my oath. And so I hope to bring their experiences and the rest of our family's experiences into the room with me. I also come from Hollister, California, which is a rural community. And so I hope to think about folks from my hometown and in other rural environments similar to that as I enter this space with you all and we work together. But also I want to really, and I think especially with everything going on in the world right now, I think our charge is more important than ever, right? We want to make sure folks see themselves in data, folks feel comfortable with data, people trust data. And I think that's what we're all called here to do. And I think when it comes to education, there's so many different trusted messengers. And so we're not only thinking about traditional practitioners, but we're also thinking about first-gen students having to use these tools and figure out for their own. First-gen graduates who then become the education advisors for their families. And I think also too, of so many other trusted community members, whether they're folks at churches, folks who work with youth in different spaces, in different capacities. And so I hope that we get to work together and build tools for them and make sure that they know how to use it and we communicate that accurately. So I'm excited to learn from you all, but hopefully also bring something helpful to the table as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Johnson. This is a note for everyone. Please make sure your mics are on green when you start. We would like to officially welcome you to the Community Engagement Advisory Board. We are grateful to have your insights and participation. For more information about our new member, including biography and term dates, please visit the Cradle-to-Career website. And I would like to again ask everybody to welcome Marissa Johnson, Marisa Johnson, and join me in a round of applause as we welcome you officially. Very great way to start the day. So now we will move on to agenda item 3, introduction of the Community Engagement Advisory Board Liaison from the Governing Board. At this time, I would like to invite Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, C2C's Board Liaison and Governance Specialist, and Dr. Christopher J. Nellum, Governing Board Member, to present this item.
Thank you, Shannon. Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, and I'm the Board Liaison and Governance Specialist here at C2C. I'd like to kindly refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. And if you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. Just for a little context, back in November 2023, the Governing Board voted to approve the creation and implementation of standing liaison roles for various aspects of C2C's work. These roles established a reliable mechanism for collecting feedback and support, as well as contributing to the robust structure for collaboration. At the November 15, 2024 Governing Board meeting, our Governing Board Chair, Gavin Payne, appointed the 2025 Governing Board Liaison appointments and stand-ins. I'm excited to share that our Governing Board member, Dr. Christopher J. Nellum, has accepted his appointment to serve as the first Governing Board Liaison to the Community Engagement Advisory Board. His responsibilities will include attending Community Engagement Advisory Board meetings and sharing insights from you as the Community Engagement Advisory Board with the Governing Board. So joining us today is Governing Board Member Nellum, and at this time, I'd like to kindly ask that he share a brief introduction.
Yes, good morning. Is this microphone working? Fantastic. Good morning. I'm happy to join as the liaison to this advisory committee. I think folks know I was a part of this advisory group from I think 2022 to 2024, and so I'm really excited about this opportunity. I'm sad I'm not there today. I'm in Washington, D.C., actually on vacation, and so I won't be as attentive as I typically would be, but I will be listening in for the whole meeting. There are several reasons I'm excited about this opportunity. I think, a tighter feedback loop with the governing board, I think is a really good thing. I think folks know I have been a fierce advocate for this data system throughout its creation and now on the governing board. And so really excited and really humbled for this opportunity. And again, I apologize for not being there in person today.
Thank you, Stephanie, and a special thank you to our Governing Board Liaison to the Community Engagement Advisory Board, Member Nellum, for joining us here today. No need to apologize. We appreciate your presence. So for more information about our Community Engagement Advisory Board Liaison, including biography, term dates, and responsibilities, please visit the Cradle-to-Career website. Members can also find information about our additional Governing Board Liaisons there. So before we move on to our next agenda item, do members have any questions or comments? Scanning. Okay. We will now move to agenda item 4, approval of the minutes from the October 16th, 2024 Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting. Members have all had the opportunity to review the meeting minutes from October 16th, 2024 Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting. Would any members wish to make any additions or corrections to the meeting minutes? Okay. Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the October 16th, 2024 Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting minutes as submitted?
So moved, Member Khosravi.
Thank you, Member Khosravi.
I second Member Takagi.
Thank you, Member Takagi. Okay, before we vote, let's pause for public comment. If you want to comment on this agenda item, please note that comments should be limited to the October 16th, 2024 Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting minutes. Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, can you please confirm how many people in person and on the line wish to make a comment?
Is there anyone in the room in Sacramento? Seeing none, for members of the public attending via Zoom, please raise your hand if you'd like to comment on this agenda item. At this time, I see no raised hands on Zoom. I will close public comment.
Thank you, Stephanie. We have a motion and a second, and for clarity of the record, I can repeat the motion, which is to approve the Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting minutes from October 16th, 2024. Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez will now perform a roll call vote.
Member Chang,
Abstain.
Member Countryman. Oh, Member Countryman, this is a vote to approve the October 16th draft meeting minutes. Member Gamboa. Member Gonzalez.
Yes.
Member Gottlieb. Member Johnson. Member Jones. Member Khosravi. Member Largo.
Abstain.
Member Lopez Valdez. Member Lopez. Member Navarez.
Approve.
Member Nguyen.
Aye.
Member Rodriguez.
Abstain.
Member Takagi.
Aye.
And Member Viveros Walton.
Aye.
For the clarity of the record, we have 9 ayes. and 4 abstentions. The motion passes.
Thank you, Stephanie. We will now move on to agenda item 5, update on the Office of Cradle-to-Career Data. Cradle-to-Career's Executive Director, Mary Ann Bates, will present this agenda item.
Thank you so much, Shannon. This is Mary Ann Bates speaking. I'm the Executive Director. And today I'd like to highlight some of the key parts of our work that I highlighted at the February 28th Governing Board meeting and key work that's happened since you last met in the fall. So I'd like to begin, if we can go back one slide, by looking at Cradle-to-Career's purpose. Now more than ever, it's crucial that Cradle-to-Career serves as a source for trusted information. And I'm actually going to read through a part of our education code. So it reads, there's hereby established in state government the California Cradle-to-Career Data System for the purpose of connecting individuals and organizations to trusted information and resources. The data system shall be considered a source for actionable data and research on education, economic, and health outcomes for individuals, families, and communities, and provide for expanded access to tools and services that support the navigation of the education to employment pipeline. So I often go back, I think our education code is a little bit like, fine ancient literature. Every time you read it, you get something new from it. But I think it's really important to repeatedly go back and remind ourselves what our purpose is and why we're here and why we're doing this work together. The bold that's my bold. It's not bold in the statute. But I think that the moment we're in right now really highlights the wisdom of Cradle-to-Career's transparent governance structures. We have a large and complex governance structure. It takes a lot of staff effort and a lot of your time together with our governing board to do this work. But you as a board make recommendations in public about how the people's data are stewarded and used. And this includes our commitment and mandate to make sure we keep data secure and individual privacy protected. We're working diligently to monitor current developments, and we're committed to navigating any changes to ensure consistency in the build and the continuity of the data system. Next slide. A couple of updates. So in December, the governor announced the unveiling of his master plan for career education at a press conference at Shasta College in Reading. And I was honored to attend and be a part of this conversation with education leaders in the North State who shared details of their collaboration on Jobs First and K-16 collaboratives. And the goals for this master plan are to prepare learners for the workforce by strengthening career pathways, prioritizing hands-on learning and real-life skills, and advancing access and affordability through streamlined collaboration and partnership. And you can see the executive summary that was released that day for more details. The governor's proposed budget for the master plan includes $100 million one-time and Prop 98 funding for the community college's chancellor's office budget for credit for prior learning and a proposed California Career Passport, as well as $5 million for the Government Operations Agency to implement statewide planning and coordination. So I'll dive more into those in the next slide. Cradle-to-Career is working collaboratively with the Community College Chancellor's Office and Labor and Workforce Development Agency to bring to life the governor's vision for a career passport. The California Career Passport will be a customizable electronic record that people can use to share validated and verified academic and non-academic skills when they apply for a job. And this is going to involve a lot of collaboration. So the different roles for the people we're working with here, the Community College Chancellor's Office's role is to build and manage the Career Passport, integrating it with 2 existing programs that they have. The eTranscript California, which is an electronic transcript platform to transfer electronic transcripts, and Mapping Articulated Pathways, or MAP. Cradle-to-Career's role is to inform the design and implementation plan for the passport by convening the relevant state partners and documenting models and national standards. Labor and Workforce Development's role is to bring employers to the table and identify how skills can be mapped across academic and employment contexts. We're really grateful for the cross collaboration with our partners in developing the career passport to ensure that Californians can demonstrate their skills when applying for jobs. The governor's master plan also calls for a new statewide planning and coordinating entity that will be housed under the Government Operations Agency. And according to the governor's proposed budget and the executive summary of the master plan, the role of this new entity is to bring together the state's education segments, workforce training providers, and employers to improve forecasting of needed skills and coordination of resources and initiatives across state government in alignment with recommendations from the master plan. And I want to make clear that the new coordinating body would be separate from Cradle-to-Career. The role of Cradle-to-Career is to be a neutral source of information that's accessible to the public, including families, educators, researchers, and lawmakers. And the coordinating body may use information from Cradle-to-Career to inform their decisions on policy. Okay, I'd now like to take a moment to discuss our key priorities within the work plan for this year. Our first priority is the release of the Student Pathways Dashboard visuals with a focus on accurate and privacy-protected data. Our team has continued to put in long hours to ensure that the Student Pathways data story is released as soon as is feasible. And we've made major progress since you last met in the fall. So our subject matter experts and data providers have reviewed file extracts for the data that powers the dashboard. The data that we ingested previously has now been linked at the individual level across 8 different entities, and then we were able to share that data with the Employment Development Department so that we could bring in and merge in the earnings records from EDD as well. And all of our data providers have been really collaborative in this effort. They highlighted opportunities to clarify the data visualizations and problem solved with us on how to keep those visualizations intuitive and easy to use, even when implementing complicated data privacy protocols, including data suppression to protect the privacy of individuals. So I'm super grateful for all of our data partners' collaboration on this, and the release of the dashboard is really going to be a shared win for all of us. During the February governing board meeting, Ryan Estriato, my colleague, gave a presentation that walked us through some examples of how we've problem solved specific instances, remaining true to our commitment to data privacy and also the ability to disaggregate the data by geography and by demographics. So I really encourage you to take a look at that presentation that Ryan did on February 28th that goes into detail. A significant effort has also focused on the security of the data. In the past, Dan Lamry has given presentations on how we develop and update our system security plan in collaboration with our data providers. And the security work is extensive. In addition to the overall plan, we also need to routinely conduct security testing and vulnerability management. And findings may include something as seemingly trivial as a small WordPress engine plugin that leverages a JavaScript library having a known vulnerability. And this is the kind of thing that we have to be vigilant to ensure reported vulnerabilities are dealt with swiftly. Our system integrator has mocked up the visualizations that are powered by the data in the data system. They've delivered to our team the 6 visualizations for our team's testing and review. And we continue to work collaboratively with our contractors as we just put the final touches on those. So we're working on those final touches and look forward to celebrating the release with you soon. I want to take a step back now and remind us how groundbreaking it was for Cradle-to-Career to commit to working first on data tools for the public, for students and families. Nearly all other state longitudinal data systems were set up first primarily for data insights within government. So responding to requests from ledge staff or facilitating data sharing between departments for their own data analysis. And Cradle-to-Career's decision, which came from this public planning process and the governor's commitment, the legislature's commitment to it, Cradle-to-Career's made a decision to create public dashboards first, and that's different from most other longitudinal data systems. The stakes of those data linkages and the privacy protections that go along with it are higher when we start with a public data tool instead of internal data usage for government's own data analysis. So I think that's incredibly important. The other piece that ties with this is that the commitment to public engagement and input in public meetings required us to set up the human infrastructure first. So seating the governing board, appointing members of these advisory boards, hiring the team for our office, and doing all of that in the tandem with setting up the most difficult parts of the data infrastructure. And I'm glad that the state took that approach and that we set up that human infrastructure from the start, because if you don't, you lose an opportunity to have public trust, engagement, and buy-in from the start. So we're excited about the forthcoming release of that dashboard. This year, we will also focus, I'm now looking at number 2 on the left, we will focus on developing the research request process and our secure data enclave. And our general counsel, Julia Blair, has already begun outreach and discussions with her legal counterparts at our data providers about this. In February, Ryan Estrellado also presented to the governing board about the work ahead to build a secure data enclave and launch the research request process. It's going to be a major lift involving technology, infrastructure, program decisions, collaboration with our partners, and legal frameworks. And the purpose of the presentation Ryan gave was to help us all remember the agreements that came together in the planning process in the context of our overarching signed legal agreements and our statutory charge. So feel free to listen to that presentation from February as well. And I'm particularly excited about this because I do believe that the secure data enclave and the ability for entities to request access to data to do research studies will be one of the most powerful aspects of the data system. So we have a focus on that this year. We also have work on deck, which includes working on more flat files with aggregated data for researchers to use and focusing on new dashboard development as well. We also have a wealth of data we plan to continue ingesting, including new data from the Department of Developmental Services, CalKids, which was just added as a partner at the February meeting, and new workforce data, which I'll talk more about in a moment, in addition to new data about teachers. So in this context, I also want to share that we can deliver on our work plan 5-year timeline and new work only with the resources mapped out and the budget change proposal that we presented to the governing board last summer. Next slide. I also want to highlight the important and challenging work that we and our partners have done collaboratively to make this data system come to life. In December, I had shared an early wins document, which you can find on our website, and it highlights an overview of some of the historic work we've accomplished together. And this includes breaking down silos to come together in order to shed light on Californians' journeys. It includes the highlights around adding Department of Developmental Services as a data provider to ensure that people with developmental disabilities have their stories included in the data system. We've championed the scaling of CCGI in accordance with our statute, and now well over 2 million students have specialized college and career planning, making it easier for students to apply to CSU and UC and the community colleges. And overall, we focused on reducing administrative burdens for students. And we've done all of this with collaboration at the center. Our engagement and data programs teams have conducted extensive user-centered design work to ensure accessible use of our data tools by the public. We also have a data governance structure that enables all the data providers to come to the table with the public and lawmakers. So we're really excited for what's to come. I also want to highlight a resource, and I realize this is too small for you to read. I'm just trying to make sure you know what you've found the right thing when you click on the link. And this is a checklist that shows all the steps needed to create the data dashboards and visualizations. So if you've ever been asked, as I have, whether AI is going to enable us to just create these data visualizations with one click, you can use this checklist as a resource to help people understand, some of the steps it takes across data governance, the infrastructure, security, the engagement, public input, and then the actual development of the analytical tools. So really grateful for all of our partners' collaboration on this. Next slide. In February, the governing board took action to add the ScholarShare Investment Board as a new data provider to the data system. They administer CalKids, which is a savings accounts for students program that the state has invested in. And I want to highlight a quote here from governing board member Cifuentes that really talks about how Riverside County has focused on using linked data to increase CalKids take-up. And I also want to uplift that among the recommendation ideas that the Data and Tools Advisory Board considered this past year, Member Fong had recommended linking CalKids data and adding that to the data system. So just want to uplift that. Additionally, in terms of additional potential data, wanted to also make you aware that Senator Laird has introduced Senate Bill 575 this year, a bill that would clear the statutory path for limited data sharing between the Franchise Tax Board and Cradle-to-Career. If passed, this bill would allow the Cradle-to-Career Governing Board to request limited earnings information from the Franchise Tax Board, enhancing the data system's understanding of income and tax credit uptake in California. Last fall, you also heard about the convening of a planned Cradle-to-Career workforce data task force. And I'm happy to share that that task force has now kicked off and has been meeting. To kick off that process, Secretary Knox from the Labor and Workforce Development Agency sent us a detailed memo about potential research questions and data elements related to the workforce. And I really recommend you take a look at this memo. It starts by essentially laying out a learning agenda for the most important questions the agency sees and which data points would be needed to be able to answer those questions. The task force is about halfway through its meetings. On April 3rd, we're planning to have a community conversation open to the public where we focus on the outcomes of that task force and the topics they've been discussing. So you can watch the Workforce Task Force from our website. And we also heard a broad update on the potential new data during the February Governing Board meeting from our team and from Abby Snee at Labor and Workforce Development Agency about potential new workforce data. I'm really excited about this work. This would represent a major expansion to the data in the data system. And more workforce data is something that was discussed during the planning process, slotted for about this point in our journey, and we're really excited about that. I want to give a big thank you to Alexis Takagi, Member Takagi, and to Lisi Kencherman-Kuros, who are both serving and sharing their expertise on that task force. So really huge thank you to Labor and Workforce Development Agency. They've been phenomenal partners in this and working really collaboratively with us to identify potential data elements that their departments could share with Cradle-to-Career. An update on CCGI. The California College Guidance Initiative continues to scale statewide. This slide illustrates their reach as of last summer. And you can see this point in that graph where the state's investment as part of the Cradle-to-Career effort kicked in to make this tool free to districts. So their growth continues just since you met in the fall. When CCGI presented to our governing board in November. Just since then, they've brought more than 50 additional local education agencies into partnership. They've also been, if we can go back for just a second, they've also been all over the state, training more than 8,000 educators in the last calendar year, including at 57 in-person events across the state. Many of those in partnership with our, with CSU, with UC, and the Student Aid Commission. So it's been a really wonderful effort that their team has put in to meet educators where they are and ensure that this tool that the state has invested in is used to its maximum capability by students. Next slide. CCGI also recently announced a leadership transition. We're excited to keep working with Mary Aguayo, who's CCGI's new Chief Executive Officer. She's going to serve alongside Tessa Carmen DeRoy, who will transition out of her role at the end of this calendar year. So we're really grateful to Tess for her leadership, and we're excited about what's ahead with Mary's vision. Want to welcome and highlight a new team member who recently joined our team, Sushil Singh, he's an accomplished data engineering and architecture leader and brings over 2 decades of IT experience, including working with leading Fortune 500 companies. He's joined Dan Lamry's team, and we're really excited to have him on board. I also want to highlight a couple of planned and currently open job postings. One that we're planning to post soon is for a cloud engineer on Dan's team. Would really appreciate if you can highlight these job openings. We also just recently opened a research data specialist 2 position. This is on Ryan's data programs team. So if you know someone who's loves to do quantitative research, user-centered design, and working with the practical tools we're building with our partners, this is a great opportunity. We also have one that I haven't put on here. We also have an AGPA, Associate Government Program Analyst position open that reports directly to me and works very closely with me on special projects and keeping my life organized. So I think that position closes April 1st. And the others close a bit after that. So it's really crucial. Many of you elevate our posts on LinkedIn and through your own networks. We want to make sure as many people as possible hear about these opportunities, and grateful for your help with that. Okay, let me see if there was anything else I wanted to highlight. Oh, I also wanted to just wrap up by acknowledging that there have been smooth parts and wrinkly parts in the process of you making recommendations to the governing board. And I'm really grateful to all of you for being in that process with us. One thing you're going to walk through today is a revised process that the governing board took action on in February in response to your experiences and the experiences you shared with us. I'm really optimistic about it. I think it'll provide for a more flexible and holistic way for your ideas and your collaborative ideas to come to the governing board. And I just wanted to give you all a thank you for being in this space with us whenever we're doing something new. There are sometimes wrinkles and opportunities for continuous improvement. So I'm really optimistic about this new process and looking forward to working through it with you. And with that, I will conclude my update.
Thank you, Director Bates. And I will apologize for my disruption. I had flashbacks to college when you have a tickle in your throat and there's like a 300 perks lecture. So thank you for your patience. We will now open it up to any member questions or comments. Member Khosravi.
Thank you for the updates. I don't know, was it capturing these? Okay, cool. Thank you for the updates. On this slide that you were sharing, and I know this is a CCGI update, so maybe we can't quite answer all these questions here, but I'm curious about the graph that shows engagements, and I'm wondering how does CCGI define engaged partners? Like, you know, from the sort of, hey, we've met with them, to they have now fully implemented CCGI within the framework of what they're doing. The numbers are very, very heartening and good to see, but I'm wondering, is it sort of like, hey, we've met with them, so therefore all of their schools count as engaged, or no, they've opted in, they're kicking, and things are moving? Because that was the concern for the last several years. I know many schools have not opted into CCGI yet.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm happy to speak to that at a high level. I want to make it clear I'm not speaking on behalf of CCGI. It's a really good question. So there's 2 ways that students can engage with the platform. Thanks to education code changes and this last summer, the number of schools who are engaging very directly with CCGI is increasing. So right now, any student in the state can log in and create an account with CCGI. And that would be kind of the soft touch engagement that any student student can do on their own. What this graph shows is the detailed engagement with the school district, where the school district signs a partnership with CCGI and does the hard work on the back end of doing the alignment of the data for the A to G requirements for college admissions and working with CCGI staff hand in hand to ensure the data in the local schools information system aligns with the UC course management portal. So those numbers are about the numbers of students in school districts who are doing that detailed partnership with CCGI. So thank you for that question. And then even within that, right, there's also opportunities. My understanding is, a school district can do all of that work. And then there's also opportunities for additional engagement of bringing those lessons on financial aid into their classrooms and all of that. So there is a range of engagement, but that graph reflects the school districts who've done the in-depth partnership with CCGI.
Member Rodriguez, I co-lead a collaborative in Tulare and Kings County. We have 17 high school districts that have high schools. We have partnered with CCGI over the last 4 years. And so part of their work into the deep dive, so we brought them in August and they called it a data cleanup. And so when we're talking about like deep dive, like it was a full day of cleaning up, making sure their UC portal and everything and all the data in the system is clear. So when students are going to launch college applications, that everything is correct. So it is very, if a district is in and it's very in depth, like, cause if you're not working in it every day, like I sat there and I was like, cause it's not something, I'm not a school district, so it's not something that I work in every day, but it was very, very in depth.
Thank you.
Member Navarez. So one follow-up comment with regards to CCGI, the additional factor about CCGI when they come into a partnership with the school district is it also can help with identification of if a student is missing their SSID, because then when they're in partnership, the student's account won't show if they haven't, done a match with CalPADS to get an SSID. So it actually helps the data infrastructure in a student information system in multiple ways, as well as the A through G portion. And I just wanted to elevate, I'm really thankful for the C2C team to incorporate CalKids data, especially at a moment where we're trying to find any available source to help our students feel encouraged to pursue post-secondary. And CalKids, has been waiting with money. And so I'm really happy that we're bringing that into this playing field. So thank you.
Thank you. Member Largo, would you like to make your comment?
Yes, Member Largo, I want to just, as I was looking at the graph that you shared a minute ago, I also want to bring light to the K-16 regional work that is happening across 13 served regions in California. And I know that being involved in 4 of the served regions in the valley, in the San Joaquin Valley, there has been active engagement with CCGI, inviting them to conduct workshops throughout the regions, because one of the requirements for school districts participating in the K-16 regional work is that they opt into CCGI. And so when I was reviewing the graph, I was attributing that engagement to the numbers that were reflected. I want to think that as, just for the northern region itself, we're convening over 20 districts to come and learn about CCGI and to hopefully integrate it as part of their efficiency methods at a district levels. And I know that, for Member Rodriguez, we have similar engagement in the Tulare Kings Madera, President Madera Collaborative. And so I just want to make sure that I point that out, because I think at a state level, it's important for us to intersect efforts that have an impact on one another.
Thank you so much for lifting that up.
And just a follow-up question, and we don't have to answer that necessarily now. I presume this is going to come up throughout today and has been a conversation at the governor's board more broadly. But as we talk about sort of, I think, the broader engagement and efforts that CCGI and C2C are having at different levels and the scale of the work, I'm curious, what are the measures, and I saw some in the report, but I'm curious, what are some of the measures that are being taken for data security, specifically with what's happening at the broader narrative of the country and what's going on there? Because, when you mentioned financial aid, and that just reminded me that there's so much work that, for example, the CA Student Aid Commission has been doing to protect student data in the wake of what I think is weaponization of this data by the Trump administration, but without getting too political. Curious, what are some measures that are being taken to make sure that these data are safe and secure?
I can speak to that at a high level, though I don't discuss the details of this in public meetings. For the data system, we have a security policies task force that meets approximately monthly, and that includes the chief information security officers of all of our data providers. And they're all invited to be a part of this collaborative effort. And that means that the strict, security protocols that we have in place in our system security plan, which follow state and federal laws and ensure that we're maintaining the security of the data system, are in place. So we're not doing that work by ourselves. We're doing it collaboratively with our data providers, with the Department of Technology and our partners here at the state to ensure that we're doing everything we can to keep the data secure. And that includes very specific and strict protocols. It includes different kinds of testing, penetration testing and otherwise, and is an ongoing thing that isn't just a one-time piece, but anytime that we add new functionality to the data system, anytime we extend the boundary of the data system, if you will, those entities all review our security protocols and the testing that's done. So we're not doing this in isolation. And I would say you talked about security, but I always think of this as security and data privacy, and they go hand in hand. So a lot of what has been most complicated in preparing for our first public dashboard has been in ensuring that the farther you zoom in, right? Because we know that disaggregation by geography and student characteristics is the thing we've been asked for the most. And we need to balance the ability for people to zoom in and see what does this look like in my community without the ability to zoom in too far. So once you start zooming in again and again and again, eventually it gets blurred out and you can't see any information if there's too few people in a given cell. And so that's that combination of very thoughtful data privacy protocols that were developed in the planning process and ensuring that we don't think about data security as a one-time thing, but rather an ongoing thing that we're doing in partnership with our partners is how we're approaching it. It's incredibly important.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Do we have any final questions? We can take one more. All right. We will now move on to agenda item 6, update on the advisory board recommendation process and changes to the governance manual. I would now like to invite Ryan Estriado, Director of Data Programs, and Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, C2C's Board Liaison and Governance Specialist, to present this item.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Me again. Joining me today is Ryan Estriado, Director of Data Programs. So again, for this agenda item, I'd like to refer members to the staff report that was created. If you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. So today I'll be providing a brief summary of the 2 Governance Manual Review Committee meetings that met over the winter months. High-level overview of the February 28th Governing Board meeting as it relates to the Governance Manual Review Committee updates. And then I'll transition over to highlight pertinent changes to the Governance Manual that will directly impact you all as Community Engagement Advisory Board members, in particular, the Advisory Board recommendation process. I'll then hand it over to Ryan to provide a high-level overview of how the approved changes to the Advisory Board recommendation process will impact today's meeting. Next slide, please. So the Governance Manual Review Committee was approved back in November 15, 2024, as well as the committee charter. This designated 5 governing board members, including the board chair and our vice chair, who served as the committee chair, to serve on that committee. So in accordance with the committee charter, the responsibility of the Governance Manual Review Committee entailed carefully reviewing and providing edits to the governance manual along 4 specified key areas of focus, those being revisit the chair and chair-elect elections process and terms, clarify procedures related to per diem for committees and subcommittees, as well as representation of advisory board members, consider changes to advisory board recommendation process, and provide stylistic changes or technical additions and or corrections. So as outlined in the committee charter, again, the committee met twice, December 6, 2024, January 30th, 2025. So the first committee focused on reviewing and discussing suggested changes provided by the office, and these changes were broken down into 3 particular categories to aid in member deliberation. Those being grammatical or stylistic changes, technical additions, clarifications or corrections, and potential changes for member discussion. So after, if we can go back a slide, please. Thank you. So after discussion, the first committee meeting concluded with the appointment of committee liaisons, so those being the committee chair, Robert DeGorda, and governing board member, Brian Sublé. And they were responsible for working offline in tandem with the office to provide draft language edits on the sections discussed during deliberation. So the advisory board members may recall receiving an email from Executive Director Marianne Bates outlining the proposed changes to the advisory board recommendation process back on January 17, 2025, and advisory board members were encouraged to provide public comment. The committee then reconvened on January 30th to review and finalize draft language, which was then brought forward to the governing board at the February 28th governing board meeting. Next slide, please. So what was brought to the governing board? So at the February 28, 2025 meeting, the board approved 10 edits in total. Again, they were broken down into those 3 sections reflected on the screen, which members can also see the breakdown of how those 10 edits broke down into those respective categories. In particular, I'd like to draw members' attention to the 4 substantive changes approved by the governing board. These were specific to succession planning, representation of advisory board members, per diem for committees and subcommittees, and the advisory board recommendation process. I'd now like to take this opportunity to unpack some of these substantive changes for members, and my intent in doing this is to ensure that all members have a clear understanding of the revisions as it directly relates and affects our advisory board members. Next slide, please. So this slide here highlights 2 particular highlights. So first one, per diem for committees and subcommittees. So while statute allows governing board members to receive per diem and reimbursement of travel expenses, statute does not address whether this provision applies to the advisory board members. However, language was updated to reflect that in order to ensure equity across our 3 boards, so the governing board, and 2 advisory boards, and contingent upon budget availability, advisory board members may continue to request per diem compensation for attending the annually scheduled full board meetings, such as this one today. However, per diem is not provided for committees, subcommittees, or brief virtual meetings. Again, representation of advisory board members. So we understand that advisory board members change employment, or a few of us are lucky enough to retire. However, the governance manual wanted to ensure that there is clarification that advisory board members are appointed as individuals based on y'all's experiences, expertise, and perspectives in your respective fields, and you do not necessarily represent the organization that employs you. However, I do want to clarify that an exception does apply if an advisory board member or applicant is employed by an entity with representation on the governing board. I do want to pay a special shout out to a technical addition, clarification, or correction that was approved, which is that in order to maintain the goal of ensuring a diverse advisory board that reflects a broad range of perspectives and experiences, language is added to the selection for advisory board's committee procedures to specify that the committee and governing board consider various factors in the appointment of advisory board members, including ensuring that no single organization or type of organization is disproportionately represented. So later today, members will have an opportunity to learn more about the advisory board recommendation process. Next slide, please. So this graphic tells a big story, and I know it's kind of small, so I want to give a special shout out to Arthi and Sophia, who assisted with getting this in front of you guys today to follow along. So let's walk back a little to what statute states. So statute establishes 2 advisory boards to provide input and feedback to the governing board, so both with distinct scope and authority. In addition, statute specifies that a primary role of advisory board members is to listen to and work with the public to understand their needs and be able to communicate these effectively to fellow advisory board members, the office, and governing board members. So in establishing the governance manual, the governing board outlined the authority of these two advisory boards. They defined the scope of recommendations they may provide, and they established the process by which advisory board members may submit proposal recommendations to the governing board to potentially act on said recommendations. However, given the relatively recent establishment of Cradle-to-Career, 2024 marked the second year that advisory boards participated in this recommendation process. So while the former recommendation process allowed advisory board members to form a subcommittee at the summer advisory board meeting to meet over the summer to draft a report prioritizing recommendations for proposals, this report was then shared with our advisory board members to serve as a resource for completing the pre-meeting survey that was shared prior to the fall meeting. So at least 1 month prior to the fall meeting, advisory board members were shared the pre-meeting survey to rank order proposals, and up to 3 proposals were then prioritized and considered at the fall advisory board meeting. So at the fall meeting, following member deliberation, advisory board members voted on whether to advance each proposal, including any proposed amendments to the office for the feasibility study stage. So overall, the 2024 recommendation process functioned as was previously outlined in the governance manual. However, over the past 2 rounds of recommendation, the office observed that the process was particularly challenging to navigate, not just for the office, but also for advisory board members. So in particular, the office heard from some advisory board members that they felt limited in the ability to only prioritize 3 recommendations a year. And this limited opportunity for advisory board members to present their ideas to each other, modify or combine ideas where relevant, and edit or strengthen multiple proposals in response to feasibility considerations shared by the office. In addition, some advisory board members raised procedural questions and concerns. So overall, the former process did not allow for as much collaboration and interaction in public meetings as may be typical in advisory bodies, and was administratively burdensome for the office and advisory board members. So considering all these factors, our governing board chair, Gavin Payne, requested that the Governance Manual Review Committee reassess the most effective approach to refining and enhancing the advisory board recommendation process. So this brings us to the new process outlined on this slide and in your handout in front of you. So after much deliberation between 3 particular choice points on the advisory board recommendation process, the committee came to a consensus on changes. So due to the complexity and various nuances in this recommendation process, the following graphic is also available for reference in the governance manual. So I'll now voice over how this process will work overall, providing a big picture. So first, members will notice that the advisory board recommendation process begins in the spring, so it begins today, when the office shares the proposal form and rubric. So later today, during agenda item 11, we'll review this section in more detail. The next stage of the proposal process happens directly after this meeting, in which the proposal process is open to the public and Data and Tools Advisory Board members who could submit community engagement proposal forms to the office, which are then posted on the C2C website. And this process is May 1st of each year, which is the deadline. At the summer advisory board meeting, which is traditionally held as a joint advisory board meeting between the Data and Tools and Community Engagement Advisory Board, members are given the opportunity to publicly discuss the ideation of recommendations received from the public. Members are also going to have an opportunity to learn more about available data points and ask questions of the data providers and the office. So at least 6 weeks before the fall meeting, Community Engagement Advisory Board members will submit their proposal forms to the office. So there are a few options that members can choose to do this. So members may choose to submit their own proposal form. You can submit a joint proposal form with up to 5 of your fellow members. You may sponsor a proposal form that a member of the public submitted, or you can further refine concepts from the ideas submitted by the public or proposed in prior years. So the office will post all of the proposals submitted to the C2C website 2 weeks prior to the fall meeting. So at the fall meeting, each member or team of members will present their proposal. So presentation time will be divided based on the number of proposals submitted to ensure that the board has the opportunity to hear about all the proposals submitted. Afterwards, members will then discuss the ideas, and this will include how different proposals may complement or contrast, voice their opinions on which proposals they find most promising for advancing C2C's ability to provide actionable information to the people of California. In addition, the governing board's liaison to the Community Engagement Advisory Board will attend the fall meeting to learn from everyone's discussion. At the fall meeting, the office will be asking for 2 members to volunteer to work with the governing board liaison to work offline before the spring meeting to draft a report. So I'll go into the report in a little bit more detail. Between the fall and spring meeting, a few things are going to happen. 1, the office will conduct a light touch feasibility analysis of the proposals. What this looks like, we'll share a little bit more in detail later today. However, proposal authors will have the opportunity to update or clarify their ideas in response to the office's feasibility process. So y'all remember that at the fall meeting, we'll ask for 2 volunteers to draft a report, and this report will have 3 notable sections. It'll include a link to all proposals members submitted and discussed at the fall meeting. It will include the office's light touch feasibility analysis write-ups. And this is the most important section. It will have an opportunity to summarize the discussion at the fall meetings. Come spring, members will have an opportunity to discuss the draft report and share any comments or reflections on the report in the spring public meeting. Depending on members' discussion, the report may be updated if desired. So the report will then be shared with the governing board at their May board meeting. And the purpose of this report is to inform and aid in the work of the governing board's deliberations, ideas, and work. So as I mentioned before, we'll revisit this process later today with particular attention to key dates and timeframes in the 2025 proposal process. And at this time, I'd like to hand it over to Ryan to walk members through what these changes mean for today's meeting.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Ryan Estriato, Director of Data Programs. Thanks, Stephanie. So for this, my part of the agenda item, I'll be walking us through what the rest of this current proposal cycle looks for us. So Stephanie just did a summary of what the new cycle will feel like going forward. And then I'm going to ask you to draw your attention back to the proposal cycle that you are in the middle of right now and nearing the end of. So you're kind of in this funny place where you're ending a cycle, but you're also at the very beginning of the next one. So this part is about finishing this one up. To understand how these changes affect our process this year, I'll recap first what we did in October of 2024 during the last community engagement meeting where we last saw each other. And during that meeting, we were using the previous proposal process, of course, and members voted to advance 2 proposals for in-depth feasibility studies. Those proposals were expansion of constituent-based community conversations was the first one, and then the second one, data literacy outreach tools. We will talk more about these in-depth studies and the results during the agenda item 10. So now let's summarize the changes in the proposal process that Stephanie talked about earlier. These are going to be the next steps that you'll be experiencing over the course of this meeting, during the May Governing Board meeting and then during the time in between. Lots of changes, but essentially they boil down to these. Instead of voting on up to 3 proposals for studies, there will not be a vote. And instead of doing in-depth studies on up to 3 proposals, the office will instead do light touch feasibility studies on all proposals. In March, so where we are right now, instead of the advisory board voting on which proposals go to the governing board, there will be no vote. In the new process, all proposals will go to the governing board. And the advisory board will be responsible for summarizing their advice about the proposals at the May governing board meeting. Finally, where before the governing board would vote to take action on proposals in May, the governing board may instead take a range of actions in response to the proposals, with the option to take action and vote being only one of them. So that's a summary of what we did when we last saw each other in the fall. Also a summary about how we will proceed given the new changes to the process, the proposal process, which again focus on creating more opportunities for discussion and advisory on all proposals and not just 3. Later in agenda item 10, we'll review the 2 in-depth feasibility studies. We'll also facilitate a conversation with you so that you can decide on the key points about this year's proposals. Again, not just the ones that had feasibility studies, but all of them. That up to 2 members will present with the governing board liaison at the May governing board meeting. And that will conclude my part of the presentation. I'd like to hand it back to Shannon Serrato.
Thank you for that informative presentation, Stephanie and Ryan. So before we move on to our next item on our agenda, I would like to open it up to the floor for any member questions or comments. I invite you all to provide your thoughts. Member Robbie.
I think it was expected I was going to have some questions. Thank you for this detailed proposal and presentation. I can tell that there's a lot of work that's gone behind this, and I really appreciate the thought. The process before was very messy. I think in the last meeting I was a little bit maybe too open about that. However, I could tell that there's a lot of work done to clarify this, so I really appreciate this effort. The question that I have is, so this process A starts moving forward from this upcoming cycle, is that correct?
The changes are effective now, so the way we'll proceed,
Okay.
Starting during this meeting, specifically in agenda item 10, is with the new process.
But the portion of the fall starts to impact this coming fall. So that's what the next proposal process is. That like with the top 3 will not be picked. All the proposals. And I'm curious about that point because my next question there was going to be, so if there is no top 3 anymore, does that mean as we go through this process and proposals are submitted by members of the advisory board, that say 15 comes through, then all 15 goes to the governing board?
That's correct. All proposals would. Yes, with crucially, the result of the work that the advisory board will do to summarize high-level themes and patterns they want to go along with those proposals to the governing board.
So we don't have to argue and fight too much. If we like something, as long as these are good and separate, then we don't have to pick the battle, which I think that was a core of a lot of the frustration in this past fall, is that we would have 3, which we ended up with 2 somehow anyway. So, but then we can move forward multiple to the government. This is very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Navarez?
Member Navarez, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. I know that in previous processes, if someone was terming out, they would still be able to submit a proposal. How does that work with the new iteration of the process? If someone is terming out, will they have the opportunity, to submit a proposal, even though this process is now kind of elongated?
I'll give a high-level answer to that, and then we'll turn it over to Stephanie in case I missed anything. But essentially, for that question, there isn't anything about that that's changing. All the proposals that get discussed during the October meeting have to be sponsored by an advisory board member, whether it's because it's their own proposal or because it is a proposal from the member of the public. If by the time the advisory board member in question had already termed out and is submitting it as a member of the public, they would need an advisory board member to sponsor it. But just checking with Stephanie to see if there's anything else there to add.
And legal counsel, Marianne, feel free to elevate after me. The understanding of the process is, and this is something that is reflected in the Data and Tools Advisory Board recommendation process, we had an individual member who submitted a sponsored proposal who completed their term. What happens is they're asked to come back in the fall meeting to elevate and present their ideas to the advisory board. The only difference between a seated advisory board member and an individual who is presenting their ideas as a former advisory board member is the language in the governance manual specifies that two advisory board members, which would be the active member, would be asked to work offline to draft that report. So you can still present your idea, you just won't be offered the opportunity to volunteer to draft the report.
This is Marianne. One more big picture reflection on this. The additional clarification that I think is very helpful in the new process that we worked through with our legal counsel is that up to 5 of you could work together on an idea too. And I think one reflection we had very strongly from this last round is just that the benefits of all of you, working together and having your ideas come together is really powerful. So it's true, you could, all 16 of you could put your name on your own idea and have 16 ideas come to the governing board. You could do that. If you think about what will be most powerful, right, the governing board will then essentially need to think through as they do their work annually, including, providing input on and approving our work plan, deciding whether to request more resources. Some focused ideas might go farther than 16 disparate ones. So to your point, like if someone's cycling off, you could submit that and why not partner with an ongoing member together? And as you think about it, you could submit 16 separate ones, or you could combine and submit a couple where you work on it together as well. So there's a lot of flexibility in this process, and really look to you to think through how do you think you can most powerfully make recommendations and elevate ideas for the work.
My apologies. I really am excited about that idea of being able to collaborate, because I think that was something that was missing that is really integral. I mean, part of what we're trying to do is break down silos, right? But my only question is with regards to Bagley King, how does that impact if, say 5 got together? How does that have to roll?
Mark Paxton, counsel for C2C. Again, as long as the conversation stays within 5 of you, there isn't a Bagley Keene problem, because that is doesn't rise to the level of a quorum of the committee. But that said, you should be careful, because, for instance, if you talk to 3 people who then talk to 2 people who then talk to 3 more about this wonderful idea that you have, you've now reached a quorum. So you have to be very aware of who you're talking to and who they're talking to if you want to not run afoul of Bagley Keene.
And just one follow-up, which I absolutely agree with Member Navarre, is this would probably have solved a lot of the issues before. But would the body still have the ability to turn down bad ideas, for lack of a better terms, right? So if everybody comes out with, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 proposals and what have you, and there's no limit, which sounds fantastic. I think the whole 2 or 3 proposals never made sense to me. So getting rid of that is a good first step. But then on the other hand, for me, I'm curious, does the body still have some layer of ability to determine what is presented to the governing board, and not just everything that comes from the funnel and we just sit here and let it go through to the governing board?
I'm looking at Ryan. Do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I've just got one comment and hand off to you. So the short answer from my point of view is all the proposals would go, but the choice to have a summary report from the advisory board is an intentional one, because we wanted to make sure that your thoughts, feelings, and analysis of the proposals as a whole were discussed, clarified, and then explicitly included in the report, so that the governing board, when they receive the proposals, then have the context from you about what you think about those proposals, which you think are the most feasible and which not.
at the risk of sounding like, again, having a lot of questions, this concerns me because I'd like to think we're going from a very closed system to an entirely open system where now there is no authority within the advisory board or any charge. I think there is an important for the perspectives of not just to be, this is what happened in the fall, if I may, is exactly to the point where the advisory committee came out with recommendations that this board sort of maybe read, not fully, not really agreed with it, what have you, and moved on. So if we are saying our thoughts and feelings will be shared with the governing board, how are we to say that that's gonna, not the same issue isn't gonna happen again over? So I mean, you know, there was a lot of work put into this process, but maybe as we give feedback for future, I do think potential challenges with this process again, where proposals are gonna come in, everybody's gonna wanna introduce the things that they think make sense. So if we have a huge list of things that are going through and there is no ability for this body to funnel some of these out, that we don't think it's ready to move forward, because there were disagreements on what to move forward, but there were some very clear agreements this past fall on what not to move forward. I think that, so that to me, we should still exercise some level of power and authority as an advisory body. So not everything goes to the governing board, and it kind of creates noise for the proposals we think are the most powerful and the best proposals to move forward.
This is Marianne. So my reflection on that is that I think the wisdom of the new process that the governing board adopted is that there's transparency about all of the proposals that were advanced by one member of an advisory board, right? So you can put your name on exactly one, or you can together, you know, you can do one as multiple people, but your name goes on exactly one. And those are linked to and summarized in the report. And crucially, you know, we have member Nellum who's listening in today, as he will in the fall, listening to your deliberation, and 2 members of the board can work with member Nellum on that summary report. And the point of having a summary report is that it's not just a list of all of the ideas without context, but that report would summarize the conversation that you have. And I think, you know, you've all worked on collaborative reports. There's an opportunity for that report to then uplift. There seemed to be unanimous enthusiasm about the following things. Some concerns were raised about this. However, counterpoint was the following. And so big picture, here's how these ideas were discussed. And the point of the report is to summarize your discussion in the fall meeting, summarize your discussion in the spring meeting. So I think very grateful for the time that the liaisons are going to be spending being a part of this meeting with you, so that can be a mechanism for really providing some color for the recommendations. So it's not only that list of all the recommendations in our light touch feasibility analysis, but also a summary of the conversation you had here.
We have time for one more comment.
Member Gamboa, just a quick question. I thank you all for the amazing work on what you've done. Question is, will we remain with the same details and rubric that was created in the past, or are we going to update and revisit that to meet these kind of new structures?
The rubric is still roughly the same. You'll use it for a different purpose. So I think the usefulness of the rubric in helping you think through in a structured way, right? How does this align with the mission? How do we think about feasibility versus impact and all of that is still there. But instead of preparing you to take a vote on which 3 to prioritize, that can prepare you for the discussion in as you think about like which ones do you want to lift up in the report and which ways. So yeah.
Great. Thank you all for those thoughtful questions and comments. We really appreciate this feedback today. We will now pause for a 5-minute break. So we're asking that folks please return promptly at 11:30. All right, welcome back. We will now move on to agenda item 7, presentation of the Community Engagement Advisory Board Demographic Survey Results and Language Access Plan. I will be presenting this agenda item, and I would like to refer members to the staff report that was created for this agenda item. If you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. So as written in statute, Cradle-to-Career's governing board is intended to reflect the cultural, racial, geographical, economic, and social diversity of California. And as many of you know, in 2022, the office received a request seeking the demographic information of C2C's leadership. Following approval from the C2C governing board, the office facilitated the collection of governing board demographic information. The first year's survey asked about race, ethnicity, and gender, as well as if board members would like to share more about lived experiences in future iterations. All responses were self-reported and collected anonymously via survey, and that information was aggregated for the purposes of equity and transparency and posted to the Cradle-to-Career website. The office committed to conducting a demographic survey annually, and at the September 2023 meeting of the Community Engagement Advisory Board, members agreed to expand the survey scope to include CEAB. This year's survey for 2024-2025 was issued to members on February 6th. So we will post aggregated responses from all of C2C's boards, governing data and tools, and community engagement on the C2C site upon completion. But I'm going to use the next few minutes to preview CEAB's survey results. So this year's 2024-2025 Community Engagement Advisory Board Demographic Survey had an 82% response rate, down from 88% last year. However, we were grateful to those who took this year's survey, and we appreciate your ongoing engagement and support. We asked members to self-report on race, ethnicity, and gender, and this year 9 respondents identified as female or women and 4 as male. In terms of breakdown by race and ethnicity, 3 members identified as Asian or Asian American, including Japanese American and Chinese Mexican. 1 member identified as African American, with 6 members identifying as Latino, Latina, including Latinx, Hispanic, and Indigenous Mexican. And 3 members identified as white. I would like to voice over that all responses were self-reported by Community Engagement Advisory Board members with no predetermined categories. So this year's responses do not include individuals who identified as Middle Eastern, multiracial, multi-ethnic, nor as Native American Indigenous, with no members identifying as such. But that information is included in the full board results for continuity over time. Next slide, please. The second part of the demographic survey gave board members an opportunity to provide information about lived experiences, and I want to thank this group for your ongoing willingness to share about your lives. C2C's advisory boards are meant to serve as voices to the public, representing the wide range of Californians that Cradle-to-Career is charged with serving, and we are grateful to have your unique insights. For 2024-25, the majority of respondents identified as a first-generation college student, which is also true for those who identified that they came from a low-income background. 3 advisory board members identified as immigrants, with 7 members identifying as bilingual. 3 members note that they provide care for someone in their household, with 2 members stating that they didn't identify with any of the named categories. We also asked members to volunteer additional information about their lived experiences, and some members share that they came from a migrant family, while others self-identified as a father, son, husband, and students. So during these times, I want to reiterate how proud and thankful we are to have you all as members. Your representation is a reflection of the state, and you all play a critical role as we continue our work to build a data system that serves all Californians. So in terms of other work related to the advisory board's purview, I'm glad to speak to you all about C2C's new Language Access Plan, or LAP, and the office's efforts to ensure meaningful access to C2C's public tools and resources. C2C is housed within the Government Operations Agency, and last year, GovOps directed departments to identify a language access coordinator and develop and adopt a language access plan. As C2C's equity lead, I was glad to be able to document and detail the language access work the office is already employing, such as ensuring interpretation services for public meetings, or the translation of materials and products, which range from the C2C website to fact sheets and infographics, and then lay the groundwork for expanded language access for C2C in the future. In addition to C2C's IO1, Cynthia Lopez Montes, who joined the office last fall and serves in a bilingual capacity and as C2C's official language access coordinator, I would like to recognize former and current C2C staff, Brittany Ortiz, Helen Fun, and Angelique Palomar, who met over the course of 2 months to research language access plans and efforts on both the national and state level, identify models and best practices for Cradle-to-Career, and work to operationalize language access for the office. Included in the LAP are needed next steps for the office, such as building out a C2C specific glossary so that we can communicate about wonky things such as data integration or feasibility studies from folks from all walks of life. As part of the Community Engagement Advisory Board scope to ensure equitable access to actionable information, we are seeking your support to help the office think through how we can cast a wider net for our language access survey, which asks folks about native language and the languages that they speak at home. At this moment in time, folks who respond to the survey are typically those who follow C2C closely and mostly identify as English speakers. So I'd appreciate your thoughts about how we might disseminate the language access survey to broader communities. We are also seeking a language access liaison who will serve as a sounding board to help guide this work. The office will collaborate with the language access liaison to flesh out the goals previously mentioned with this individual or individuals, as we would love to have a liaison and a secondary who can serve in a supportive capacity. The full language access plan is linked in the staff report for this agenda item 7, and I encourage you all to take a look. We are grateful to have your feedback received by April 18th, which we will take into consideration for the final language access plan that will be presented during the May 9th meeting of the governing board. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be glad to hear your thoughts on the dissemination of the language access survey, whether you would like to serve as a language access liaison, which I hope you will. And I'm also grateful to hear your broader feedback on language access plans and the work that we have in the works. Member Nguyen?
Yeah, Member Nguyen. I'm curious about the demographic survey. I know it's just the boards, but does the office also complete it?
Marianne?
I can speak to that. Our staff are state of California employees, so our ability to collect demographic information is through the processes the state of California has. There is, I believe, an optional opportunity to submit demographic information when you apply for jobs. The rub is we're a small enough team that we can't get aggregated data back.
So until we're big enough, we don't show up. Member Navarez.
Member Navarez, I'm just wondering, are there any limitations to sharing the information with like our consulates or embassies to maybe share out to the constituents that, they represent? So I'm just thinking about how can we expand our access? And I'm just wondering if there's any like legal limitations for us reaching out to our consulates. I work very actively with our Mexican consulate. So just, is there any limitations for us reaching out to embassies or to consulates to, say, hey, let's present to you, and then have them transmit that information or support with the information transmission of C2C's work?
Because you mentioned legal, I'm going to look to Mark for this one.
Mark Paxson, and at the moment, I can't think of any legal reason not to. I mean, I can't. No, sorry.
Great. Great. Other questions, comments? Okay, well, if you would like to serve as liaison, we will be sending an email. I'm going to follow up about this, but we are just grateful for your time and attention. I'm really excited about the work going forward. So thank you all. So with that, we will move on to agenda item 8, discussion of advisory board member recruitment. I would like to invite Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, board liaison and governance specialist, and Angelique Palomar, C2C's deputy director of communications, to present this item.
Hello, good morning again. This is Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, Board Liaison and Governance Specialist. For this agenda item, I'd like to refer members to the staff report that was created. If you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. So as established through statute, the Community Engagement Advisory Board is responsible for examining whether the managing entity is creating strong feedback loops with data users, supporting evidence-based decision-making and analytical capacity, and ensuring equitable access to actionable information. Advisory board members serve staggered 3-year terms. Each year, advisory board members are appointed by the governing board in a process outlined in the governance manual to fill vacancies from advisory board members that have completed their terms. This year, Community Engagement Advisory Board members, Member Chang, Member Khosravi, Member Largo, Member Navarez, Member Rodriguez, and Member Viveros Walton will be completing their term in August, resulting in 6 vacancies. The term for these vacancies will be from 2025 through 2028. So it's important to note that this selection process aims to ensure a diverse and highly qualified representation across both advisory boards. So again, today your role as an advisory board member is essential to achieving this goal. Today we'll be providing a high-level overview of the role for the Selection for Advisory Boards Committee, the draft application, and draft selection process. Angelique Palomar will be walking members through the advisory board member recruitment process. In addition, we'll also discuss how the upcoming vacancies will impact the composition of the Community Engagement Advisory Board, and we're looking for member feedback on potential ideal populations for appointment and prioritization of future candidates. Your insights will be shared with the Selection for Advisory Boards Committee for their consideration at their inaugural committee meeting on April 16th. So I want to elevate here that the committee does have final say in the final advisory board application, rubric, selection materials, and ideal populations for appointment and prioritization, but your feedback is greatly appreciated. Next slide. Go back one slide, please. Perfect. So the governing board voted to approve the formation of the Selection for Advisory Boards Committee, composed of 5 governing board members, and the committee charter at the February 28th board meeting. In establishing this committee, the governing board acknowledges that the significance of recruiting advisory board members with diverse expertise and advancing equity is important to the work of C2C. As established in the committee charter, the committee is tasked with ensuring that advisory boards consist of collaborative individuals with diverse perspectives and relevant experience, enabling them to provide timely and high-quality recommendations to the governing board. The committee will convene for its inaugural meeting on April 16th to approve and provide input on application, rubric, and dissemination process plan. During this meeting, the committee will also determine desired characteristics and expertise for advisory board members. The advisory board application forms will be posted on the C2C website for interested applicants beginning on April 28th and will close on May 16th. Following the application submission process, the committee will perform an initial review and scoring of the applications received and reconvene for a committee meeting on June 27th to discuss potential slates for each advisory board, and this will include rank ordering candidates and runners-up. The final slating of advisory board candidates will be brought to the governing board for their approval at the August 15th governing board meeting. Next slide, please. So this slide here outlines the Community Engagement Advisory Board member snapshot. The advisory board consists of 16 public members, which includes advocacy organization staff, community organization staff, and the end users of the data system, such as practitioners and students. So as we can see here, out of the total 6 vacancies this year, 2 of those individuals represent advocacy organizations, 1 community organization, and 3 practitioners. So given their departure and pending the selection of new advisory board members, the composition will include 3 members that represent advocacy organizations, 3 members that represent community organizations, 2 practitioners, and 2 students. Next slide. For our visual folks, this slide here visually depicts the impacts of the vacancy analysis that we saw in the previous slide through these 2 charts. So the 2025 board composition and the 2025 member term out analysis. So these charts are also available on attachment A in the staff report. As members consider which ideal populations for appointment and prioritization of future categories to elevate to the Selection for Advisory Boards committees, members should also utilize attachment B in the staff report, so the bios and term dates, for a more holistic view of the Community Engagement Advisory Board. So as we can see, for example, there are currently no tribal representatives or individuals who represent research organizations. Members may also note that other populations that are not currently represented may include individuals representing Northern California, north of Sacramento, individuals representing California State University, and adult education. Next slide, please. The proposed 2025 Community Engagement Advisory Board application can be found on attachment C of the staff report, and I want to take this moment here to unpack the proposed application. Questions 1 through 8 are standard. 9 and 10 pertain to self-identification. 11 through 14 are substantive and the core of the application. So the red line proposed application notes various changes. However, there are 2 substantive revisions. The first includes the addition of the selection criteria for advisory board members. So pursuant to the governance manual, in order to ensure that advisory board members represent the public, starting in fiscal year 2024, a person who works for an organization or person represented on the governing board may not be selected to serve on an advisory board. And an organization is defined as a state agency or representative of a segment as opposed to providers that report to an agency. So the inclusion of this section aims to not only enhance clarity and transparency, but also ensuring that individuals who come to this application are understood and made note of the fact whether they are eligible for appointment to the advisory board. The second substantive revision is around applicant self-identification. So when applicants fill out the application, they're going to be asked to self-identify themselves on question 9. So whereas in previous years, applicants could select all categories that apply to their contributions, experiences, and/or work, this year, the proposed application organizes self-identification into 4 distinct categories: work contributions, status as a student, status as a parent-family member, and regional level focus of work. So within these 4 categories, applicants may select only one option that best aligns with their self-identification. So when the office prepares the slating materials for members voting, applications will be grouped into those identified categories. So the office also wants to provide clarity regarding student self-identification. Due to the amount of support minor applicants, so those under 18, may need to fully engage on the advisory board, and due to staff constraints, the office wants to acknowledge that the advisory board applicants will be limited to individuals 18 years of age or older. In addition, in previous years, the office has defined students as those in undergraduate status. However, individuals who identified as a graduate student were categorized primarily based on their work contributions, with their student status recorded as a secondary demographic. So this year, the office will maintain that same approach to ensure consistency while accurately representing individuals' primary roles and contributions. The revisions to self-identification aims to remove ambiguity in how applicants self-identify, while providing a more comprehensive perspective on how the incoming slates of candidates can enhance the diversity, lived experiences, skills, and expertise on the advisory boards. Attachment D includes the proposed 2025 Community Engagement Advisory Board rubric, which will work in conjunction with the application. The proposed rubric outlines the evaluation criteria to be utilized during the advisory board selection process. And the criteria includes community affiliation, community ambassador or actionable experience, soliciting input and communicating needs and concerns, and student and educator tools. At this time, I'd like to ask Angelique Palomar to share an overview of C2C's outreach strategy.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning, members. Angelique Palomar, Deputy Director of Communications at Cradle-to-Career. I'm going to go over the outreach strategy for recruiting new members to our advisory boards. Our goal is to ensure that our boards reflect California's diverse communities. And so we designed a multi-pronged approach that prioritizes regional outreach, targeted engagement with key groups, and accessible communications materials. And so our strategy aims to provide accessible materials that are translated in Spanish. So you'll see that the content that we're rolling out with, we're creating accessible to Spanish-speaking communities. The materials include promotional flyers, the applications themselves, and social media content. C2C's regional outreach targeting the North State, the Central Valley, and Eastern Sierra is already underway. We've already reached out to tribal communities, community-based organizations and foundations, student-led organizations on college campuses, and local education offices, particularly in rural and underrepresented regions. And so we're sending out our copies of the printed flyers in both English and Spanish. so that they can help amplify the application window. And these flyers have a nifty QR code that will take users directly to the application landing page. In addition to the regional outreach, we're connecting with local groups, state entities, and student organizations here within the Sacramento region. So we're identifying opportunities for C2C to table events and public meetings and post our flyers on bulletin boards. Finally, you may notice in the white manila envelopes in front of you all, copies of the flyers for you to take back. Give everyone a moment to open these.
Angelique, they're sealed, just FYI, so might take a second.
Our goal is to have you take these back to your respective regions and post them in your regional public spaces, public libraries, college campuses, your workspace, coffee shops, etc.
And even if I get in the shade, I usually try to sit where because it's in the shade. And
Yeah.
they have a fan.
Member Nellum, I think you are unmuted.
That heat is hard.
All right. All right, on to digital media. We're utilizing digital media to provide resources and extend our reach. We have developed an application landing page on the C2C website to house our resources and the applications and key dates. And so the QR codes on these flyers take you to the landing page. We're implementing a social media campaign to promote the application period. And a key component of this social media strategy includes creating media toolkits for partners. The toolkit will include graphics, captions, an email copy, so you can easily uplift and share within your own networks. The last component of our digital media strategy involves hosting a virtual community conversation on April 24th before the application window opens. And at this community conversation, viewers will have direct access to C2C staff to answer their questions and clarify anything about the application process. And we hope you all can join and that you can promote this informational session within your networks. Through a combination of regional outreach, targeted engagement, digital media efforts, and accessible materials, we're confident that our recruitment efforts will foster an inclusive process. And we're committed to building diverse advisory boards that reflect the communities we serve. Thank you for helping us spread the word. With that, I'll pass it back to Stephanie.
Thank you, Angelique. Building on what Angelique Palmar just shared, I really want to hone in here that the selection for advisory boards process is a collaborative effort that couldn't be made possible without our respective advisory board members. So today, as community engagement advisory board members and ambassadors of the data system, members will be asked to partner with the office, governing board members, and community members to recruit for advisory board applicants. So as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, the office will be sharing members' feedback regarding ideal populations for appointment to the Community Engagement Advisory Board with the committee. I want to take this opportunity to give a special shout out to Sophia Aguilar and Arthi Wasu, my governance team colleagues who will be assisting me in capturing members' feedback to elevate to the committee. However, I also want to note that it's equally important for advisory board members to actively leverage their resources, networks, and connections to encourage and recruit qualified candidates in an effort to ensure that the committee receives a diverse and well-rounded applicant pool that aligns with the advisory board's purview. Thank you for your continued support and partnership, and I'd like to pass it to Shannon Serrato to guide members through questions, comments, and discussions.
Thank you, Angelique and Stephanie. We will now open to you for questions or comments. Member Gonzalez.
Member Gonzalez, I have a quick question, and I might have missed it when you touched on it, but in terms of the prioritization, I know that you spoke in regards to areas north of Sacramento. Was that identified by the general body or as by staff, or kind of seeing that gap?
I will say that we have almost no representation in that area, and we want to make sure that we are reaching all communities
Yeah,
and all members of
of course.
California. So that is a real goal for
Yeah.
us. We have a lot of representation in the Bay Area, Sacramento, LA, Southern California, but we know that there is a gap, especially when we're thinking about, the San Joaquin Valley and then thinking about northern states. So that is a real goal for us this year as we expand our outreach, but I'm happy to have others weigh in as well.
Yeah, if I can just add, in regards to that, I obviously completely 1,000% agree. For me, what I think of as, and I might be completely wrong, but for us to, and I ask staff to also explore the idea of us potentially also looking and encouraging folks from Imperial County, which is the county that obviously borders the Mexicali, Southern California border. Because I'm not sure that anyone here is from that area. And so also recognizing that oftentimes that area is overlooked, very similar to north of Sacramento. And so being somebody from the Coachella Valley and the Coachella Valley that very much works closely to Imperial County, but not very similar struggles, but different with their own things and that they issues and that they are trying to advocate for. And so that's just a point and comment I wanted to make.
Thank you. Point taken. Definitely. Member Rodriguez.
Member Rodriguez, I would like to amplify something you just said. Normally on boards like this in Sacramento, the Central San Joaquin Valley is often overlooked, and we were shocked to see 3 of us chosen in the last 3-year term. Because the struggles are different, because we're not close to areas where there is a lot of resources for our families and students. And so I want to ask the committee to really ensure that the CSU part, but the Central San Joaquin Valley, because we're both coming off at the same time. 1 came off last year, 2 coming off now, that there is at least 1 representative chosen, whether that's a practitioner or we have 3 different Native American tribal populations in the Central San Joaquin Valley. So I do think that's somewhere where I can help reach out to see if we can get some individuals from there, but I definitely would like to see that representation again.
Thank you. And we appreciate your collaboration there. Yes.
And just to add to that, thank you for elevating that, Member Rodriguez. That is also something that we're aware that our Data and Tools Advisory Board needs an individual that represents the Central Valley, being, as personally for myself, hometown is from the Central Valley. I understand the unique needs that area of California needs elevated. So thank you for elevating that for the Community Engagement Advisory Board as well.
Member Sravi. Oh, thank you so much. Member Chang.
Hi everyone, Member Chang. Thank you for elevating that conversation around representation across all of Calexico. I am from Calexico, so representing Imperial County, although I live in Los Angeles. So as I'm stepping down this year from the board, I'm happy to unite efforts in amplifying across the state, but also in that specific region.
Thank you, Member Chang. Member
Thank you.
Navarez.
And also just wanted to note that the members who are tuning in virtually may not know what these flyers that I'm referring to look like, because we printed them out for members. So we'll make sure to get you guys copies of both English and Spanish so you can share out within your networks. Thank you.
Member Navarez. So I was looking at the advisory board member recruitment target audience. I'm seeing students, educators, researchers, practitioners. I know we are doing a lot of work with workforce. And so I'm wondering if on April 10th, is this opportunity can be shared with workforce? And would we want to maybe recalibrate some of our target audience with the new work that you guys have been so diligently and not uneffortlessly doing? So.
Thank you for elevating that. We will also make a plug for that during the workforce community conversation to note that applications will open. So hopefully that will capture some of those folks who are engaged and interested. So thank you for elevating that as well. I would like to note, Member Gamboa, we're a little bit behind schedule. So I just want to make sure that we are catching up a little bit, but please proceed.
Thank you so much for the time. Member Gamboa, I just wanted to elevate as well. Notice that would love to get somebody who works with our disability community and within the state. Also get somebody on there. We had talked about adult education, but military veterans as well within the state. So if there's need to tap into networks, let us know.
Yeah, thank you for elevating that. We have partnerships with the Department of Rehab through our other work streams, and they're definitely a partner that we are looking to tap into to elevate this opportunity. So thank you for elevating that. That's very important to have all Californians represented on this board.
Absolutely. So thank you, Angelique. Thank you, Stephanie, for that. And just thank you all for your thoughts today. This is really, really important work. And this is the purview of this board. This is the scope to make sure that we are doing our level best to reach all Californians, as Angelique just said. So I look forward to engaging with you all during this process. It starts April 24th. We are starting this conversation today with you all. So this will be a collaborative effort and just looking forward to engaging with you further. So thank you for that. So we will now turn to our next agenda item right before lunch, agenda item 9, report out of community ambassador work of advisory board members related to the Cradle-to-Career mission and vision. So I will be leading this agenda item, but we will be hearing from you all. So this is a standing agenda item at our community engagement advisory board meetings. The governing board is committed to developing a governance culture with a focus on ambassadorship. As valued partners and collaborators in our shared mission and vision, your contributions and input are instrumental in our continued success. So during this time, members can share what you have been up to related to advancing C2C's mission and vision. For example, members may share that they've attended a conference or participated at a community outreach event. So with that, I would like to open it up to have you all share. I know you all are doing great work, so I'll give you a second to think about it. Member Navarez.
Member Navarro, so I was really excited, as I said, to see some the Cal Kids data coming in because I've been, that's my new baby. CCGI has been my long term, and so Cal Kids has been something I've really been trying to embrace. And so, in my district, we've worked a lot collaborating with Cal Soap to have all of our Cash for Colleges. That all of our Cash for Colleges have Cal Kids there, and so that ranges from $10,000 to maybe $15,000 claimed in one night. For our college savings accounts. I'm also working with the State Treasurer's Office to do a Golden One event. Treasurer Ma is doing several across the state, so we're working to do that. We're hoping at that event to claim like $75,000 for our students. And then we've also at my district, we've been doing a train the trainer model. So we've trained Sac State's Financial Aid Office. We've trained Sac State's College Assistant Migrant Ed program. My team's also worked with Native American individuals in higher ed, training our community school staff, and all that to present at an upcoming California Early Wealth Account Summit that's coming on April 9th. So my passion is that I don't want monies to be left on the table, especially in a year where my students may not be able to complete their FAFSA or the DREAM Act for all the different reasons that, we're so aware. And so leveraging what is our state providing and how can we get those monies into our students' hands and to help them feel that they have the possibility to go on to post-secondary world. And so that's some of the things that I've been doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Member Navarez. Any other updates for members?
Member Chikagi, I've had the pleasure of being on the Workforce Task Force, and that's been a really meaningful experience. I really love the hands-on working sessions. I know Mary Ann Bates has been watching, but being able to work with so many diverse perspectives on amplifying the workforce part of the Cradle to Career has been so meaningful to be able to engage and progress this work forward. So I've been a part of that. I presented at our Fly Forward conference at Santa Clara University. It's first gen low income. So I was able to talk about a little bit about Cradle to Career and then my work as basic needs coordinator at Santa Clara University.
I've been co-authoring some policy at the local level with Santa Clara County to increase access to public benefits for our students and increase accessibility as well. And then so far this academic year, I've been able to coordinate over $30,000 in emergency aid for our students to be able to continue their education at Santa Clara University. So really just trying to champion the work that we're doing, but yeah, really excited to continue this work.
Thank you so much, Member Takagi.
Member Gamble, I think right now it's fair to say that we've all gone through many, many challenges recently, and hearing a lot of our constituents and members in our communities who are just trying to navigate all this stuff. So been very fortunate to be able to listen to a lot of the issues and a lot of the concerns. And then right now moving towards planning our second conference, which is called the Empowered Conference, in which we are going to hopefully have it on May 17th. And we're inviting everybody to come out. We're looking for resources, community members to come out and share what they have to offer the community. But it'll be a conference that will be open to rising high school students and community college students, and then all of our adult learners as well, who are trying to navigate this whole system of leveraging and understanding what like Cradle-to-Career really would mean. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so as we conclude this agenda item, we would now like to open the floor to our first general public comment period of the day. At this time, we will open it up to members of the public for general public comment. This is our final item before we break for lunch. Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, do we have anyone wishing to make a public comment?
With no public commenters here in Sacramento, let's move to Zoom. For members of the public attending via Zoom, please raise your hand if you would like to comment. Giving it a few moments. At this time, I see no raised hands. I will close public comment.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. So at this time, we will now pause for a 60-minute lunch, and we will return promptly at 1:10 p.m. Thank you. All right, welcome back from lunch, and thank you for joining us. Before we get back to the work of the Community Engagement Advisory Board, we will take roll to ensure we have a quorum after returning from lunch. Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez will begin the roll call.
Thank you. Member Chang?
Present.
Member Countryman Quiros? Member Gamboa?
Present.
Member Gonzalez? Member Gottlieb? Member Johnson? Member Jones? Member Korshabi? Member Largo?
Present.
Member Lopez Valdez? Member Lopez? Member Navarez?
Present.
Member Nguyen?
Present.
Member Rodriguez?
Present.
Member Takagi?
Present.
Member Viveros Walton?
Present.
And I see Member Jones is back.
Yes, present.
For the clarity of the record, we have 14 members. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Okay, we will now move on to agenda item 11, presentation on and discussion of the office's staff draft Community Engagement Advisory Board proposals report and feasibility study. I would like to invite Ryan Estriado, Director of Data Programs, and Alexander Lozanoff, Senior Project Manager, Economic Mobility, Post-Secondary and Workforce Systems at WestEd to present this item.
Okay, hi, everybody. Ryan Estriado, Director of Data Programs. Welcome back. I hope that you had a good lunch. For this agenda item, I would like to refer members to the staff report that was created for it. And if you are a member of the public and would like to follow along, you can find that staff report on our website. Note also that we've given this agenda item 90 minutes. So we have plenty of time for a presentation and conversation. Staying with this slide here, as a quick refresher on what happened on February 28th at the governing board meeting, the members of the governing board voted to change the feasibility study process. And in the slide that you're looking at, we highlight the process as it exists for the 24-25 cycle up until now, and then also the new parts that you can expect to happen at today's meeting and then after this meeting. Last summer at the joint advisory board meeting, data providers and advisory board members were present and could ask questions to guide the creation of their proposal. So that's the first box, summer. And then in the next box, fall, the advisory board members discussed proposals and then advanced 2 of them to receive in-depth feasibility studies. So that's that second box that happened when we last met in October. Now, the third box, where we are here today at this meeting, the office will share the results of the in-depth feasibility studies for the 2 proposals that advanced, but you also have light touch feasibility studies for the remaining proposals. So what that means is, per the new procedure, all of the proposals have some form of feasibility study conducted for them. Following this meeting, the governing board liaison and up to 2 community engagement advisory board members will present to the governing board at the May governing board meeting to provide a summary of the discussion that occurred at this meeting today. The board will then take that information under advisement and consideration as it reviews the work plan at the August governing board meeting. Okay, so let's talk about something that we've referenced a bunch of times but haven't gone too deep into. Let's do that now. This is about the summary report that the advisory board are responsible for. This is the one that will be finalized between now and the May governing board meeting. There are 3 components to that, but 2 of them we've done for you, and then the remaining will be your responsibility. So let's dive into that. The summary report of the summary report the governing board will receive at their main meeting consists of the following items. The office will prepare some related documents for this. The first here is the set of documents will be a list of all proposals submitted and their accompanying materials. So these include both the light touch feasibility studies required in the new process. Of course, you've seen those studies before. They are the same ones that we reviewed with you during your one-on-one meetings with the proposers in the fall. The second set of documents will be the in-depth feasibility studies that were conducted by the data programs team in collaboration with WestEd. Through that process, we solicited feedback from data providers on the data availability, the proposals, suggestions for activities for the office and also activities for the members, related cost and compliance. And then finally, the third part, which is the part that the members will be responsible for, is with the office's support, the governing board liaison and up to 2 community engagement advisory board members will submit a summary of the discussion that occurs here today at this meeting. The advisory board members who are interested in participating in the governing board meeting and also working on that report should reach out to Stephanie. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to go through what you can expect over the next 3 months, March, April, and May. First, March, let's talk about what's happening this month. The goal of activities in March is to discuss the proposals and then to summarize what the advisory board would like their presenters to convey about these proposals at the May board meeting. So we'll do that during this agenda item. Next is April. The goal of activities in April is to create the advisory board's summary report of the proposals and then share it with the public. Members who are interested in participating in the drafting of the report and presenting at the governing board meeting will need to submit their statement of interest by Wednesday, April 2nd. And should more than 2 members volunteer, then the office will review all submitted statements of interest and will contact the 2 individuals selected. To allow time for the office to review the advisory board's report, the report will be due from members by close of business on April 11th, that's the second green box on the calendar. And then the report will be shared with the governing board and posted on the C2C website on April 25th. That's April. And then finally, May, the goal of the activities in May is to present and discuss the proposals with the governing board. The two advisory board members who drafted the report will present the report at the meeting. Okay, so a little bit more now that you know the sort of cadence of preparation for the May governing board meeting. I'll review a little bit more about the report to the governing board itself. Earlier, I mentioned that a part of the new proposal process is a requirement that the governing board liaison and up to 2 advisory board members draft a report for use at the upcoming May governing board meeting. And the goal of this report is to provide not only specific suggestions to the governing board, but also to highlight common themes or considerations for the office's strategic direction. And to help you prepare for this, the office has drafted 3 guiding questions to help facilitate the discussion today after I present on the feasibility studies. To front load those so that you can be thinking about it ahead of our conversation, which Alex will be facilitating, these questions are: number 1, which proposals are most feasible and have the highest potential for impact? Second question for discussion: what additional context should be included in the presentation to the governing board? And then finally, are there any potential risks or drawbacks that need to be discussed? Okay, so far we've talked about what's happened since we last met in October, and now we're going to turn to what's happening today. For the rest of this agenda item, we are going to discuss the proposals we received in October, and by the end of this agenda item, you will have completed these 3 important steps. First, you will have received a presentation on the feasibility studies and their key considerations. Second, you will have had the opportunity to discuss them with each other. And then finally, Alex will act as a moderator to help facilitate discussion and reflect back the considerations and themes from your discussion. And now on to the proposals themselves. Okay, so as a reminder, all studies that were submitted by advisory board members are available in attachment A for this staff report. And these are the 2 proposals that were advanced to a formal version or an in-depth feasibility study at the fall meeting. First is the expansion of constituent-based community conversations proposed by member Gottlieb. And then the second that received an in-depth feasibility study is the data literacy outreach tools proposed by member Takagi. For detailed research questions, please see the proposals on the C2C website. And then there were 4 additional proposals that were submitted by advisory board members for consideration during the fall meeting. These proposals received light touch feasibility studies. They are the CEAB Strategic Engagement and Targeted Training Platform proposed by member Khosravi, foundationally ground the workforce vision of C2C to meet the needs of our community of the future, not of the past. This one is proposed by member Navarez. The third is the California C2C mobile application proposed by member Nguyen. And then finally, from data to impact educational case studies proposed by member Takagi. And again, for detailed research questions, please see the proposals on the C2C website. Okay, so let's go into the in-depth feasibility studies. For those of you who are here during our first cycle of this, you're aware of the things that we look at during the community engagement feasibility studies, but I'll go through them here again just to summarize. There are a number of different factors that we look at: governance, and other related things. But the 2 I'm going to highlight here are cost. So you see costs here on the slide, and there are two kinds of costs that we look at. The first is startup costs. So in other words, time and money required to get the proposal implemented at the very beginning, and then the ongoing costs, which looks at the cost of keeping the proposal going in years after it started. That's cost. And then the second one I'll highlight is compliance. The next slide. And there are a number of sort of sub areas covered in compliance. The first is scope, which looks at the question of whether the proposal, how well the proposal aligns with the mission of the office. The second is privacy and legal compliance, which looks at questions of how well the proposal, if implemented, lives up to the standards for privacy and the requirements that the office has for privacy and legal compliance. And then finally, neutrality of the office, which looks at questions about whether or not the proposal, if implemented, would represents any risk for the office's requirement to be a neutral entity. Okay, let's start with the first one. This is the first of two. This is constituent-based community conversations proposed by Member Gottlieb. This proposal recommends a new requirement for members to co-host community conversation events with the office. There were a number of examples of activities that represent what this would look like. I'll highlight a few here. First, organizing community conversation events in collaboration with the office. The second example, co-hosting those events. So the proposal here is for the advisory board members themselves to co-host these planned events. And then third example is the follow-up actions resulting from each of those events for the members to be able to take those on. Those are three examples. There are other examples outlined in the report. Similarly, there were a number of feasibility findings, all outlined in the report, but I'll highlight two here. The first is these are examples of the slide before were activities for the members, and then these are examples of activities for the members of the office. These would be required if we implemented this proposal. Two examples here, more in the report. First is that the office would provide marketing materials for tailored community conversations. And then second example activity is that members of the office would travel for in-person events with the members of the advisory board so that they can present on and facilitate the event together. Okay, now these are the feasibility findings. Okay, so here are some key points about feasibility. First is on cost. There are a variety of expenses to consider, including project management and coordination between the office and CEAB members. So you'll see some of those listed there. The office would train CEAB members in complying with the office's requirement to be a neutral entity, and in particular, what this looks like in community conversation meetings. So this represents not cost financially, but time that we would need to invest to align on how these community conversations would be facilitated with a particular view towards meeting our requirement to be a neutral entity. The feasibility study also estimated 25 to 40 hours of member time to co-host an event. And for the full list of feasibility findings, please reference the in-depth feasibility study for this proposal. Okay, so that was the first one, and now we'll move to the second one, which is the in-depth feasibility study about on the proposal for data literacy outreach tools proposed by Member Takagi. This proposal is about including data literacy resources in C2C's normal flow of outreach and communication. Examples in the proposal included an online home for C2C data literacy materials, an online forum for the community to discuss data literacy, and also the use of blog posts on C2C's website to support data literacy. Here are some key findings in the feasibility study. Because it's possible for the office to derive many of, oh, sorry, this is a wrong one. So there are a number of suggested activities that when we studied them, we found overlapped with current plans of the office. So some of the recommended activities were things that the office was already planning to do. And you'll see each of those listed in the report itself. Second, overall, there is low risk to the office's neutrality given the existing requirements to support the community with data use. So in other words, the office is already required to do similar kinds of activities. So in the event that we added more, the feasibility finding there was that should not represent much risk at all to the office's ability to stay neutral. Going to expenses, an analysis of expenses found that the proposal would require about an estimated 180 hours of staff time for activities and then developing the materials. Digging into the topic of cost a little bit further, in particular, an online forum in the implementation of all of what comes with that would require a significant amount of ongoing staff time. As with the other feasibility study, for the full list of findings, please reference the in-depth feasibility study for this proposal. Okay. So we've reviewed a summary of the feasibility studies, the in-depth ones for the two that we did those for. And now we are about to start the conversation about not only those two feasibility studies, but also the remaining proposals that received light touch feasibility studies. Before we open things up for member discussion, I wanted to remind everyone of the guiding questions. The first is, which proposals are most feasible and have the highest potential impact? The second is, what additional context should be included in the presentation to the governing board? And then finally, are there any potential risks or drawbacks that need to be discussed? Alexandra and I can provide additional details on the feasibility studies, but this is your discussion time to gather your thoughts and decide what you want to share with the board. Before we start that, back to Shannon, but we'll go back to Stephanie.
Yeah, unfortunately, Shannon had to step out. Thank you, Ryan Estrellado and Alexandra Lozana, for this detailed presentation. Before we open it up to member deliberation, I'd like to highlight to members that one public comment here was received for this agenda item by member Gottlieb. This was also printed and shared with members on the dais and shared with members prior to today's meeting. So at this time, I'd like to open up the floor for any member questions or comments, and I'd also like to invite members to share their thoughts. Alexandra Lozana will be leading member discussion today. Take it away, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for having me here. I'm thrilled to be your facilitator. My role as your facilitator is to be here to support you all to surface the key considerations and themes that you want shared with the governing board, and to really drive towards clarity so that the two of you who hopefully volunteer to make this presentation has an easy job to comprehensively represent the sentiments of this group. To do that, I will, one, work to really make sure that everyone has a chance to share who wants to. Two, I will pause often to summarize key themes and points as I hear them for your comments and corrections, and so that we can capture that on the record. And then third, I will carefully watch time to make sure that there's enough conversation and enough time to cover everything, all proposals and any comments that you all want to share. So are we still on track for about an hour for this discussion?
Yes, thank you for that question. We're aiming for a hard completion time of 2:25 p.m.
25, okay, great. All right. With that, I will begin and open us up for any reflections or comments. I see member Khosravi has one to begin.
It's closer. Thank you. So I guess the first question that I had was regarding the light touch feasibility studies. On the packet, as I'm looking at them, I'm not able to find it. So if somebody could, on a point of personal privilege, like just point me to where on the packet we can find the light touch feasibility studies, I would appreciate it. And then as we're talking, I can just share my reflection. I think kind of picking up from the falls conversation. I've had this conversation in depth before with Member Gottlieb. That the proposal that of community-based conversations and the proposal that I had submitted have a lot of sinking points and sort of a lot of similarities and some conflict. And I think the body talked about where there may be points of conflict. For us to move forward something that gets adopted by the governing board, I would like for us to recommend some ways to merge these two things up, because I think where we spent so much time in the fall and that resulted in sort of a outcome of confusion, frankly, was these disconnecting points. So as we kind of dive in deeper on these two proposals, I have some notes on where I think there could be connection points. For example, there is a requirement of one event for the duration of 3 years in Member Gottlieb's proposals versus once a year in mine, so the body can kind of determine which is the preferred, maybe less costly, and then by extension and slash maybe slightly differences in that Member Gottlieb's proposal, the requirement is for a hosted event. And in the proposal that's submitted, it requires an event, but doesn't have to be a hosted event. It could be an outreach effort, like an email or basically a post or something like that. So we can talk about the feasibility and the cost associated and what can, potentially get us to where we need to be. So I don't want to take too much time, and I also have to step out for a few minutes. But I would love to have this conversation as we go through the course of the next hour and see where we can find those thinking points and get to something where we can pitch this to the governing board. Thank you.
Any other reactions to the feasibility studies or proposals broadly, or to Member Khosravi's original or initial comments?
This is Marianne, just administratively, real quick. It's attachment. This is agenda item 10. There's a staff report for agenda item 10. And then if you look at attachment A, it has all the information you were asking about. Both the initial proposal and then there's like a one-page response from the office following each one.
Can you hear me? I have a question about the content of Member Nguyen's proposal. I think that the idea of building data literacy so that people can actually really fully access this information is critical. But it was not clear to me from the proposal how access to those tools would be grounded in real opportunities. In other words, it's one thing to have a set of resources on a website, and it's another thing to have real ways that those can be actioned, if you will, by communities. And so I'm curious if there was additional thinking behind that you had behind it, like how that might be used, and if we might need to consider building in some additional elements that would give it real heft and usability.
Thank you for your comment. Are you talking about the literacy tools proposal? I didn't author that, but Member Takagi did.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and I think that's where, and this is a discussion that I wanted to have with the group as well, as where the online forum would come into place or community conversations. I really do want to see this work in action. And I think because, again, we are a neutral stance, but we are trying to show students and families like this is what like the lived reality of California today. And so I think, like you said, I definitely want to ground that in the work that we're doing, and it kind of
I think works well with Member Gottlieb's proposal as well. We're going out to the communities. They can do like road shows and really show how these resources as well. But I think when interacting with data, like I was a first gen low income student, I probably wouldn't even know how to interact with these tools or know what it meant for me. Like, what does it mean to like go to a community college? Like I wasn't even having those conversations with my family. And so I really want to start like foundational of like, what do these tools look like in practice, starting with the data dictionary, which is I know something Ryan has been working on as well. But I definitely do want to see these like lived out in practice as well, and really engage and get feedback from the students and families. And that's why I also put emphasis on having it in multiple languages as well. But I also think, like you said, like we're trusted members of our community. I think what Marisa said this morning is like, we need to go out into the communities and really uplift this work and really be the face of this work and not just data points. So I think this will be a growing pain, but also an interesting opportunity for us to go out into the communities and really live out the work that we're doing and the work that's for years have been building up to this work. So I think that one way to do that is through community conversations. I feel like they've seen more engagement this past year as well, especially we're gearing up for the first launch. And so, but I definitely look forward to like collaboration on that. But I'll pause before I go into kind of my comment.
I think from both of these comments, we're hearing a real need and importance to not just produce data literacy tools, but bring them to the community, ensure that the community is prepared to make use of those. Great. Okay. Oh, yes.
Sorry, so just to provide a little bit more pointers, and again, I would like to engage with the body on this if this makes sense. But Member Gottlieb's proposal points out to specifically community conversations without, and it's supposed to be in person once over the course of the 3 years. And I just did a quick connection point between that proposal versus mine and where there are differences. So now for the body, my question, I guess, for the chair and is as well, is how do we move forward with the recommendations that we give to the governing board? Is it that there are differences here, so you may consider taking pieces of these and approve, or is it that these two have some conflict and we should not move forward with one? Are they able to take certain pieces of each of these proposals, or is it approve or disapprove in whole or in part?
Yeah, so I think that there is a way to move forward and proceed where we can take a broader look at what a community conversation and what this board's role in leading or hosting community conversations might look like. And if we take a holistic approach, it would be an opportunity to sort of reflect on the feasibility study, reflect on both proposals, and really highlight, based on all this information, what this group believes is important to bring to the board. So I think I hope that that sort of meets the need that you're describing, but allows us to sort of take a comprehensive approach to the conversation.
This is Marianne. I'll just add to that. I think this moment and the deliberation is your opportunity to elevate through your comments that Alex is so deftly capturing and our team is writing down to feed into the report. Like this moment, this deliberation is your chance to highlight and voice what you think is most important to go to the board.
Thank you for that.
So I think how about, would love to hear one more comment, and then I think to open up to other members of the board to hear your reflections on the community conversations.
I keep looking around because I don't want to take too much space.
Yeah.
Please, somebody else raise your hand. I don't want to spend too much time. Okay, and I just very quickly, so just to close the loop, and based on the comments in the fall and the reflections I've had, I think there are two parts to the syncing points for these proposals, and I would like to recommend that for the body's review and consideration, that because Member Gottlieb's proposal includes outreach to the community and community-based conversations, and the review of it, the feasibility study finds that in person could be very costly, that point could be made instead an outreach event or communication that reflects the proposal that I had initially put in mind, and instead put it for not just once every 3 years, but every year, that all members do have to do at least two communications or outreach of some sorts every year. This could be in person, but doesn't have to be. And it could be as easy as an email blast that you send out to a partner or an organization. So that's step one. That would be my recommendation. So we reduce the costs that are associated, especially because the members of the body would have to come up with their own funding for this to host it in person. So this way, at least we can ostensibly do and meet those requirements and not have to figure out a way to host an event. The second is that under my proposal, we would categorize, and that could be a cost that I recognize, even though the feasibility study we didn't get to do a feasibility study on, but I could realize there's some staffing costs to helping with facilitation. But if we just get started with categorizing who we reach out and what region they're in, that should at least give us some way of how we're, tracking how we're doing this. So I'd like to put those two pieces as a suggestion of moving Member Gottlieb's proposal forward with those two amendments, and then I would probably cut out the proposal from my side, which was about changing who the representation comes from, because that feels completely separate from Member Gottlieb's proposal. And we could pause on it for now, come back to the next year and deliberate on it again. That feels like a whole separate thing on its own. Thank you.
Member Navarez. So in having the conversation about the community conversations, I have a few thoughts. One is I'd like the idea to kind of track what are the community conversations that are taking place and to whom, right? So that way, as we're looking at are we meeting all of the metrics of our various community members and our organizations and such? So I think that there should be some aspect around there. I do, looking at what Member Takagi, has put forward with the data literacy, I think that maybe community conversations may not always be the venue. Maybe it might be more an instructional or a work group so I think the language of the community conversations, it may be a little limiting. And so I just think that those opportunities for us to maybe straight out, tutorial, let's walk through, what this looks like, or let's walk through our outreach tools, and maybe not as much of a conversation, but as a, informational session. And then, lastly, I do believe that as we're looking at that feasibility, who we're connecting with, we need to be extremely aware of who we're not connecting with. And so that's part of, my concern is I don't want our silos to continue, and that's, organizationally as well as, demographic groups and such. So I think that we really, even though it isn't added, effort on the part of the office, I think that it really does reflect, the intent of the office.
Hi, Member Takagi speaking. I just wanted to thank Alexandra and Ryan for putting so much time and energy and care into the feasibility studies. I really appreciate all the time you did in Ed Trust West, the Texas Data Literacy Program, and the National Association of State Workforce Agencies for their work and collaboration on this, and really appreciate Member Navarez's contact information as well, just because I do think that data literacy outreach tools is a really broad term. And so I think, like you said, really grounding it into what this looks like into praxis. And that's a conversation that I do want to encourage the board to engage in, just because it can look like blog post. It can look like a data literacy dictionary. It can be tutorials, YouTube standalone, or even embedded into the data stories that we will be launching soon. So I really welcome your feedback on that and what the tools will look like in person, in praxis. One sticking point was, I know the online forum, that was a conversation just because I know it will cost a lot. I know ongoing cost, and then also it potentially could pose a threat to neutrality to the office, depending on how we decide to go through with the online forum. So I'd love your feedback on if you think that'd be a worthwhile investment to continue exploring, or if you think that we should amend that from the proposal, just given we're still kind of getting our bearings together. We're still having our first launch. That might be something that we do down the road when we have more manpower, just more stuff that we have. So that was a lot, but just welcome any feedback to strengthen the proposal. I really believe in this work. I really want it to be accessible for all of California. And so if there's ways that we can strengthen it, I really welcome your feedback, suggestions, criticisms to really advance this work forward.
Right. I'm going to pause a minute to allow, I know we've covered a lot of different points to date, or so far already. And so to pause, give folks a minute just to reflect and then see if there are new voices that would like to share. Yeah, Member Johnson.
Yeah, I think to me, both of these are intertwined. I think it would be, I feel like it would be detrimental, right, if we're saying that the community conversations are a stagnant one type of presentation. I think the goal would be that the tools that the office would give us would allow us to talk to different types of people at different levels. And so maybe the conversation is about data literacy. Maybe the conversation is focused on just high level. What is the office doing? What's their tools? And I would hope that, because there's nothing in here that says it has to be like a tight curriculum that we give these community conversations in. And so I would assume that's the flexibility that we'd be getting in this training, is how do we speak to different audiences? How do we tailor that? And I would hope that we would have tools to be able to do that. And I think also something that is important is that maybe it would be less, right? I wasn't here in fall, so I don't know what the conversation was. I don't know why one was voted on over the other. But I think to me, one really meaningful interaction is much better than too many superficial ones. And I think also, to your point of like, who are we talking to and who are we not? I think we also need to say, who have we talked to and who do we need to go back to? Because one conversation and then completely abandoning that group is not helpful, right? That doesn't build trust. That doesn't create a dialogue with the office that's ongoing. And so it's going to take multiple community conversations with the same community to get them to want to interact with the office more, to use these tools, to really know how to put them in their community. And so I think, to the capacity that makes sense for the office. And, I hope that's the conversation that happens at the board in May, is really, what does it look like for the members of this advisory body to actually do meaningful engagement on behalf of the office, and to make sure that we're not damaging relationships, we're not hurting people along the way by not giving correct information, not giving thorough information, and also not meeting people where they are. I used to do for my practicum placement, I was doing hurricane trainings in New Orleans as someone not native there. And so I really had to tailor my conversation around being humble and knowing that I'm not an expert, and really hoping to provide information people didn't know. And so I think that's also something, if we're going to be facilitating these conversations, we also have to be good facilitators in making sure that we're also not damaging just in interpersonal skills as well. And so I think those are all considerations. And so I think we could be really helpful capacity, but also if it's not done really thoughtfully and mindfully, then we also could ruin things before we get going.
I think Member Cheng on Zoom.
Yes, hi, Member Chang here. First, I want to say thank you to the two members that uplifted these two proposals. I think they're definitely aligned to what the advisory board and myself believe in terms of the work in this space. At the heart of them, I really see, how do we engage the community more deeply beyond these meetings, right? And how do we provide that input and conversation across the state? As it relates to the community conversations, I'm excited about this proposal, but I do want to maybe think about the language on requiring members to be hosting or co-hosting. Maybe it's some sort of strategy conversation with the office saying, hey, we have these potential events that we're thinking about in place. Are there folks that maybe could support these efforts, and or do you have others that you can supplement to this list as we continue to engage in conversations? And I also agree with the previous member that spoke. I'm sorry I missed the name, but definitely acknowledging that the tools piece is aligned to the community conversations and engagement. So thinking about how do we bring those conversations to the table beyond just as a separate strategy, but also I would want to know more on understanding that there is overlap between what is already planned with the office as it relates to the tools, where it is that our ad board members can support and supplement some of that piece, right? So if you already say that the office is working on the tools, on the resources and the info sheets, for example, like where are areas that we feel we still can find gaps and potentially support versus us just saying things that we need that we might recognize that the office is already working on. So I think having more of those specifics so we can not be having the same conversation separately, right? But really thinking of how are we aligning the gaps that are in place to ensure that our community is able to use the tools and knows the tools that are coming from the C2C office.
Member Kotharabi?
Thank you again. I absolutely agree with what was just said, as well as wanting to also to go back to an earlier point, Member Takagi mentioning about whether or not the feedback on should this sort of online forum be there or not. I'm wondering if there is a way where we can reach the best of two worlds by not requiring that it is hosted, but leaving language that if resources are available and as deemed possible and plausible, then we hold it. So we keep the language in there for the North Star to be there, but we don't mandate it so the cost is as appropriate and accessible.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I cannot see your nameplate.
Board Member Lopez Valdez. So yes, I think about what Member Johnson just mentioned about mirroring both proposals. What comes to mind is that I'm trying to read it as quickly as possible, and so like it's fuzzy, but it'll make sense at some point. Around the cost, right now, just to be very transparent, my organization would not be able, right, to sponsor something like this, especially around, I guess I'll just say it, any language around community or DEI work, right? And so that would be very difficult for even in-kind donations to be associated with this. So thinking about the language around requirement or some type of support needed, I think it's important to be mindful of that language as we move forward with our role as well. And I also think about too is that for in-person events, I'm struggling to have community members come out to an event just because of immigration or heightened just fear. And so thinking about our role as members being in this space to alleviate that, but also being mindful that the turnout might not be the highest, or depending on how much investment we give into outreach, social media and all that stuff. Just thinking about the return on that piece is just something that I think maybe assumptions again, we may be struggling in the next few months, next few years, in how do we engage members and not parachute, come out and come in as needed, and having those genuine conversations. So just thinking about, I just think about these different layers that would just alleviate, heighten some fears.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Seems really important. So let me summarize sort of what I've been hearing, and then I think what Member Lopez Valdez brought up is sort of that question around some challenges, risks, or concerns. I think would be good to surface around potentially both of these and all the proposals discussed. So, but I think before we transition to that, some of the key points that I have heard is really recognizing that yes, there's a lot of interaction between these two proposals that receive the in-depth feasibility studies, the data tool and data literacy outreach and community conversations, recognizing that there's opportunities for data literacy to be a focus of the community conversations, but that would not be the only topic focused on within the community conversations, nor would it the community conversations be the only way to share valuable data literacy tools and resources. So sort of a very holistic look at the both and of these proposals. The importance of meaningful engagement and a real commitment from this group to ensure that the work that's prioritized is allowing for meaningful engagement with communities, including the opportunity to go back to communities, as well as ensure that new communities are being reached. And then there's, I think, some two very specific suggestions that could be uplifted to the board would be one, just really emphasizing that an online forum would depend on costs and budget available to support that. And two, potentially softening the consideration of requiring the community engagement advisory board members to be hosting events. That requirement in itself could create some challenges, particularly of the two that we've just heard. So with that, I guess, are there any additions or revisions to that synthesis that folks would like to make before we circle to surface any other concerns or risks? Member Takagi?
Member Takagi speaking. I really just want to emphasize what Member Lopez Valdez shared. There's so much uncertainty with students, and I think coupled with data literacy is data privacy, and we really want to meet communities where they are and really build that trust with them as we continue to build out more tools and more data stories and make sure we're actually creating meaningful conversations around them, not just like posting data and then there's concerns about how their data is being used. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for us to say that, hey, we're a trusted partner with you on your educational journey, on your workforce journey, if you want to transfer, things like that. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity there to really emphasize the work that you're doing related to data privacy to ensure students and families can actually interact with it and not be fearful that their data is being shared with all this heightened just uncertainty right now. I have students wanting to cancel their public benefits and cancel unemployment and because they don't want to leave a paper trail. And so there's a lot of concern about that right now, especially with immigration status and traveling. So just want to be mindful of that and emphasize that point.
Are there any other concerns or risks that came up for all of you when reviewing these proposals and the feasibility studies that you'd want to be surfaced for the governing board to be considering? Member Navarez?
Just looking at the online forum, I mean, I think that if it's very free flowing, I've been in a lot of chats where people sometimes are divulging information they may not really know that who they're divulging it to. So I'm just looking at that, the online forum and seeing if could be a way where, we kind of if there was a safe way to keep some of the information and put it back out publicly is like an FAQ. These are commonly asked questions. So, but again, you're still tracking some of that data. So those are my concerns. It's like, if we're going to gather it, it's still accessible. But, is there another way to maybe put some of those FAQs out in the forum where there's not a paper trail, so to speak, right? That's because I think the value is definitely there, but I mean, again, I've been in meetings, I'm like, oh my goodness, they literally just said that in front of, and it's like, no, like like it's so private and personal about your child or yourself. And you're like, no, you don't want to share that publicly, but people get anxious or they're also very trusting, right? And we want them to be trusting. So sometimes, yeah, so.
Yes.
Member Gamboa, I'm just hearing, I mean, exciting opportunities for all of us. There's a lot of important work that we've done. And I think even in this time of like, fear, data helps clear a lot of that stuff too. So it's really, really critical that we try to get this information out there. I think there's different layers of it though. I would start probably with looking at, because we have very limited resources. However, we have an incredible network of people that we all know in this room and organizations, right? So working with already those that already are our advocates, our allies, those who have shared the data with us, I'm sure that they could come in. I'm sure that they would send a representative. I'm sure that we could connect with like CalSO, PIQE, CSEC, Campaign to College, DCAC, all of these things, universities, and have that be our first layer and have the train the trainer kind of program and let that become the spark that, I don't want to say set the state on fire, but, gets the thing rolling. So.
Yeah. Member Nguyen, I just wanted to add on regarding the online forum. I see that there's like a line for a proposed action for the office to moderate it. And I just want to emphasize like moderation if the online forum were to come into reality, because there might be, false misconceptions or any generalizations that come up. And so, these things could impact how students think of these topics, and we don't want to give them that false information in those communities. So I just really wanted to emphasize that point, that they're able to get accurate information that's being moderated so that they're not being led elsewhere.
Sorry, Member Gamble. I would love to really elevate also the stress on families right now. I think the target audience for us should be those folks having to work 60 to 80 hours trying to make it work. Trying to convince them to attend something like this should be our task first and foremost. Because if you can get them to the table, then you obviously will get the people who understand the data and really know how to leverage it. But if we can tackle that topic first, we're good.
So I'm hearing a need for, when considerations are specifically around this, the online forum, and then broadly for information being shared, the importance of moderation, ensuring that information is correct, and therefore potentially another avenue for collecting information and responding to questions or requests could be a more trusted and feasible approach to this. Have I captured that element of the conversation? Yeah, okay. And then I'm also hearing the importance of engaging and bringing this information to students and families, recognizing the many challenges in doing so, particularly at this moment, and that there are opportunities to think about a train the trainer model, or thinking beyond the specific requirements listed in these proposals could meet that need. Did I capture that comment? Okay. Love the thumbs up. Thank you. Member Khosravi?
Thank you. And again, just in uplifting that and the point that Member Gamboa made, once again, this is exactly why I think why outreach events to trusted partners would be probably even higher impact than us trying to host our own community conversations. I can reach out to Latino Roundtable and have a much more effective partnership in their program and their outreach to the community, which they trust that organization over me trying to host a community conversation myself. It's possible that I know and have those kinds of communities. If you're talking about Zoroastrian community, I can put that because I'm on the board of our community and I can host that kind of a conversation within my community. But it depends on each of us as members of this board, where our strengths are, where our partnerships are, and where our ability is to host the event. So I lean on the side of allowing the freedom, the creative freedom to each of the members of the advisory body to determine what's the best course of action. But I also agree with Member Johnson's comment that it shouldn't be once every 3 years. It should be continuous, and we should be able to track that kind of conversation on a regular basis. Because if you go to a community, to your point, and you have this conversation and you leave them hanging. Sometimes it's not even that we lose them and we lose touch with them, but we actually might actively harm them and their perceptions of the trust that they've built in the system and this body, and we don't want to do that. So going back to Member Gottlieb's proposal, once again, I'd like to ask the body to kind of recommend that this should be more than once every 3 years. It should be annually, but it should not be forced to be in person and hosted by us. It could be in different formats. And I apologize if that point was already made by other folks while I was out. My bad.
Do members want to respond to the suggestion of sort of both increasing the expectations of your role in reaching out to communities and hosting or providing connections to these events? Does anyone want to sort of comment on that? Member Curry, is it?
Countryman Kiros. Yes, as I was listening to you, I was thinking that the way to synthesize those two things that seem actually in conflict would be in reference back to Member Gamboa's recommendation that there's maybe some really core central constituents that you want to make sure that you connect with. And so perhaps there's guidance that could be provided by the governing board of who are we primarily trying to target, and then the members of this committee could be thinking about like, okay, well, how could I best connect with that group? And maybe I think we would be in a position to host in person, but there are other community organizations near us that we partner with all the time who then I would want to be outreaching with and then making sure that that's sort of annualized and that there be food.
Mm-hmm.
I think just kind of seconding that, I know you were saying like looking towards the governing board, towards finding direction on a population, but then also like just doing like a asset-based mapped on us and our partnerships and currently where we stand to kind of seek direction. I'll just say I primarily work with students in the Inland Empire and their families. So that would be my service population, and then just kind of seeing where everyone else falls. And then it's like, okay, well, we have enough board members who are going to do presentations towards students. We have enough that are going to presentations towards practitioners. So like trying to like see that and what that visually looks like, perhaps. Oh, and then Member Jones, I forgot to say that.
Member Navarez, originally I came in and I'm like, we have these seats for a reason. And so I was very adamant about, making sure that we're, not just sitting in here warming a chair, right? But, as what you were saying, I mean, I have that privilege to be able to think those thoughts. And that's not always the case in some of our members. And so I think that what Member Jones was saying is if we had a place where we could say, these are our networks, right? This is where I'm already reaching, where I know I can reach. And then that asset mapping where we see okay, we can't, no one's coming to this way. How could we leverage that? Is there someone that could, or how could, and again, we're looking at our oncoming board members or incoming board members, thinking along those lines as well. And then that way we're not putting any member in a position that their heart may be there, but they still have to eat and be fed, right, by jobs and in very awkward positions or unsafe positions. So I hear what you're saying. I appreciate you sharing that, because it really resonated with me, and I apologize that I hadn't had that thought before, but thank you for sharing.
Member Gonzalez, as the conversation is happening, I'm kind of jotting down a couple of things that I think for me as I read it, and as for somebody and all of us in this room that potentially we could be leading a community conversation in our regions or our respective, regions. There's a couple of clarifying questions that I think maybe partial to myself being a type A person that I think I would love to have answered, right? Like, I think oftentimes in community engagement work, it's really hard to identify what is a win because for me, something could be a win, but for the organization, it could be, wow, that was a total disaster. And so I think having, it could be broad, but having a sort of semi idea of what success looks like. And it doesn't have to be a numerical, like you got 60 people to be at the conference center. It could be, after that we engaged with 10 folks and we created a partnership or XYZ. So I think that that's something that we should potentially have the governing board look at as to what they what are their ideas and thoughts around that. Some folks have already highlighted the idea of like what is the goal of the audience, and I think that if we do get direction, I think that will really guide, obviously understanding that in every region the presentation will look different, but understanding that they're not going to all be the same depending on if we are given an audience or the goal of the audience. That way I think will be a little bit of a guiding factor in terms of the topic and the touch points that we're trying to hit in the communities. And then also planning, I think one of the things that was missed in the feasibility study, and I might have missed it, but us also to think about how do we engage beyond the one time if we decide it's a one time a year? What is that going to look like in terms of cost or staffing to continue that relationship building? Because we just don't want to do that one time and then be like, what the heck happened to this organization, right? And so that oftentimes happens, unfortunately. And so I think that's one thing for us to potentially add on the feasibility study. And that's pretty much it.
Just a quick time check. We have about 10 minutes left. Okay. So I want, I think, to make sure we also have some time to return to the data feasibility, data outreach feasibility study and data literacy outreach tool proposal. But to summarize this key last point around the community conversations that I think I am hearing, and so let me know if this is capturing well. I'm hearing a real commitment from you all to be out and making connections and sharing this information in the community. I'm hearing a range of perspectives on what that might look like. So I'm hearing that it's having this happen as often as once a year, where there's an opportunity to come back to the same communities is valuable. I'm also hearing real concerns around making this a requirement given the context, the capacity, the cost required. And so it sounds like sort of capturing both the commitment and some of the concerns around making this as a requirement will be an important point to raise to the governing board. Does that capture the array of perspectives?
It does, with the only difference that I think, with the only notation that for the way at least I was envisioning, keeping the requirement is fine if we broaden the definition of what a community conversation looks like. So it's not a hosted event, but it could also include communications with community partners. So as long as that the broad list of things that folks were mentioning around the room, the language is broadened to include those kinds of things as counting towards the requirement, then I think it is good to have the requirement because we want to make sure all of our members are active. So that's just my points. And we didn't get to chat as much about it, but maybe the only added other element is I love the note about making sure we get some direction from the governing board on where they want us to prioritize. But regardless of that, I think we should just categorize and start to track who we reach out to, and by the list of categories that we already have of, when we get appointed, we know, hey, you're an advocacy org, a research org, a practitioner, blah, blah, blah. So if we just start to categorize our outreach and community conversations by the same categories, we can at least get some ideas of what is happening.
So it sounds, what I'm hearing there is sort of that trade-off of sort of, if there's a requirement, expanding what would count as meeting that requirement so that it is more feasible for the members of this board, recognizing that in itself comes with a trade-off of sort of the emphasis on meaningful in-depth events that come with clear measures of success that were measured. So there's a number of trade-offs that it sounds like is you all are raising, and then it will be up to the governing board to sort of consider those in informing their overall plans moving forward. Does that kind of capture that concept? Yeah, okay. Let's make sure that we also have some time to circle back to the data literacy outreach tool proposal and see if there are any other contexts that you all, or key considerations that you would want lifted up for the board. I may pause just for a minute to see if I see any other hands and also hands on Zoom. Okay.
I tend to be the most active on these kind of conversations. Apologies. The only, and I forget if it was in the proposal already, I apologize, but is there an element of an annual update or of some sorts to this material so we can make sure they're up to date? Was that, and what did that go into the consideration of the feasibility of the cost of the staffing and all of that?
There was ongoing costs, yeah, included the consideration of updates.
Got it. So that covers the updating portion. Right.
Hi, Member Takagi speaking. Looking at attachment B, from the notes from Ed Trust West and the Texas Data Literacy Program and the National Association of State Workforce Agencies, I really liked their feedback on that, like online forums tend not to be as used, and the better value add would be office hours, frequently asked questions, other documents like that. And I really just don't want the online forum to be like the sticking point of the proposals, because I want to make sure individuals and families can access the data and really make sense of it. And so I just want people to know I'm totally amendable to the online forum, and that could be something that gets picked up at a later date and time. I just know, again, for neutrality and the ongoing cost, that could be expensive at the office. And just with everything being uncertain and budget cuts going on, I just want to know that I'm very amendable to that part of the component, and interested in exploring other ways such as blog post, data dictionaries and things like that. So just wanted to emphasize that point while we wrap up.
Any other key considerations, contexts, risks, drawbacks on this proposal beyond the online forum more broadly? Member Navarez?
I'm so sorry. That just sparked something, Member Takagi, when you said that was CalSOAP doesn't ask an expert. And so I'm thinking something like that might be a really interesting idea, is to have time, if it's possible, to have time set aside to ask an expert about some of these questions. So we are meeting the needs of our community, but we may not be, underutilizing or overexposing.
Okay, thank you all. I want to, go back to one other key point that I think that I want to honor from Member Chang regarding really seeking to understand and fill gaps that may exist in the current work plan. And I think that is a key point that I heard that relates to both of these proposals and all of the proposals included here. So do folks agree that that would be a key consideration to set forward for the governing board? Okay. Are there any other sort of holistic considerations or points that you want to lift up to the governing board about all the proposals that were shared here today? Member Johnson?
Member Johnson, I think the most important thing to uplift is, I think what I'm hearing from everyone is that we want guardrails. There needs to be enough flexibility that we can talk to communities in a way that we're getting them the right information in a way that is meaningful to them. But also there needs to be sort of just guardrails to make sure we're doing the right thing and saying the right thing. And I think to the point of like others too, is I think expectations are important for this body, But some of us, based on our positions, we will have limitations. And so how do we set expectations with also understanding that some of us are in different constraints? And also some of us are acting wholly in our, as just a person, right? So especially for our student members, what does it mean for them to have an event on their own, right? That's a different thing than if I can also tap into the campaign within my role. So I think, how do we set guardrails and expectations, but nothing so strict that people then can't be a part of this body who should be?
Okay, thank you for that. I think that was very well said and captured by Ryan, that both expectations and guardrails while still being inclusive. It's a really important point. So, any other questions from the staff or final points?
I just want to thank members for this discussion. To Member Chang's point and the broader discussion today, a lot of the things that you all are surfacing are things that the office is thinking about. But again, we have 16 people who can help us, and we are a team of 26. And so it's just a matter of expanding our capacity. And so just want to acknowledge that. We are really hoping that we can work with you in collaboration so that, to your point, we are singing from the same playbook. We are, singing songbook. But we are doing a lot of the things that I think were surfaced today. And so I'm just really excited to be able to roll some of that out and provide those resources. We have a lot of things that I heard, tutorials, videos, all of those things are coming. And so I'm really excited that those are also resonating. So just want to acknowledge that there is a lot of work being done behind the scenes. We've shared this with you as well, but just know that there's a lot of synergy here with what you all are saying and what the office is thinking. And so this just gives me a lot of encouragement. Truly, I'm really, really excited to work more closely. And I'm just really, really grateful for all of your thoughts and attention today, because this is what I love. This, obviously engagement, but this is where I think we can really, really reach people of California. And it's so encouraging to hear you all of your thoughts, all of the collaboration, all the synergy that was in this room. So just want to acknowledge that, and grateful to Alex really for, getting us all together and hearing all the risks, all the challenges, but also the points where we all kind of are in alignment and agreement. So just deep appreciation for that today. Same to you, Ryan.
All right. And I think we are on time. So thank you all so much for this opportunity to hear and surface your voices. It's been great to hear from you. So
thank you. All right. Thank you both. So with that, we're going to move on to agenda item 12. Update from the Data and Tools Advisory Board Liaison regarding the March 19th, 2025 meeting. I would like to invite Yulia Tarasova, Data and Tools Advisory Board member, to present this item. And thank you to Member Tarasova for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Shannon. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you.
Perfect. Good afternoon, Community Engagement Advisory members. I'm Yulia Tarasova, Data and Tools Advisory Board member. I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to connect with you all. In my day-to-day jobs, I'm an enterprise resource planning analyst with the City of Roseville. And now I would like to refer members to the staff report that was created for this agenda item. If you are a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. Today, I will be providing members with an update on their most recent Data and Tools Advisory Board meeting that took place on March 19th. In particular, I will be highlighting the most pertinent agenda items, which were the presentation and discussion of the draft Data and Tools Proposal Report and feasibility studies, as well as the updates and timeframes for the 2025 Data and Tools Advisory Board recommendation process. Next slide. Before dwelling into the draft Data and Tools Advisory Board proposal report, I would like to take a moment to provide some background. The Data and Tools Advisory Board met for their fall meeting on October 1st, 2024. During this meeting, members advanced the Digital Access to Learning proposal, weaving disaggregated multilingual learner data proposal, as well as students' at colleges and universities proposal with amendments to feasibility study stage. As the office shared with the members, the governing board approved changes to the advisory board recommendations process on February 28, 2025. During the Spring Data and Tools Advisory Board meeting, Data and Tools Advisory Board members had the opportunity to review the findings of the feasibility studies, which considered factors such as data availability, data reliability, and data validity, cost, and compliance. In addition, members had the opportunity to discuss and deliberate the findings, as well as the light touch feasibility studies of all 6 Data and Tools Advisory Board proposals. During member discussion, some key discussion points were elevated, such as a desire to understand individual experiences through contextual variables, a need for long-term strategic consideration regarding securing individual identity within the data system, and considering costs and trade-offs. 2 Data and Tools Advisory members will be working offline with the office and the Governing Board liaison to the Data and Tools Advisory Board. Governing Board member Gonzalez Vasquez to summarize this discussion and present the Data and Tools Advisory Board proposal, report, and feasibility studies to the Governing Board on May 9th. Next slide. Okay, Data and Tools Advisory Board members also had the opportunity to receive a presentation on the 2025 Advisory Board recommendation process. Data and Tools Advisory Board members had an opportunity to review the 2025 Data and Tools Proposal Form and 2025 Proposal Rubric, which will be utilized in conjunction with the proposal form. In addition, in effort to provide continued support for Data and Tools Advisory Board members in navigating the information, the office provided various resources, which included a page on the website describing planned dashboards, the metrics, and a proposal repository of past proposals. During the presentations, members received a high-level overview of member responsibilities and key process milestones. Beginning in 2024, members of the Public and Community Engagement Advisory Board members may submit proposals to the Data and Tools Advisory Board for consideration. The public proposal form is available on the C2C website, and all public proposal forms are due to the office by Thursday, May 1st. The Data and Tools Advisory Board and Community Engagement Advisory Board will have an opportunity to discuss all public proposals at the Summer Joint Advisory Board meetings on Friday, July 11th. This concludes my presentation, and I would like to turn it over to Shannon Serrato for member questions and comments, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Member Tarasova. We will now open it up for any member questions or comments.
This is Marianne. Just a quick reflection, and thank you for that update, Member Tarasova. In the past, so for new members, there's sometimes been a little bit of like advisory board envy back and forth where members of the Data and Tools Advisory Board are like, well, I care about reaching communities, and members of this body are like, I'd like to propose a new data point. So I just wanted to highlight what she just mentioned about the May 1st deadline. If you actually have an idea that's more within the purview of the Data and Tools Advisory Board, you're still a member of the public. You could submit that idea as a member of the public to the Data and Tools Advisory Board, and maybe one of them will take it up, and vice versa, right? Data and Tools Advisory Board members can submit ideas to you all by May 1st too. So I just wanted to uplift that. I think some of you may have done so in the past, but for new members, just wanted to highlight if you have an idea that's more in the purview of the other advisory board, this is your chance.
Thank you for that, Marianne. Any other questions, comments from Member Tarasova? All right. Well, thank you so much, Member Tarasova, for joining us. So we'll move on now to agenda item 13, discussion of the 2025 Advisory Board proposal process, including the review of the draft proposal form and rubric. I would like to invite Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, C2C's Board Liaison and Governance Specialist, and Ryan Estriado, C2C's Director of Data Programs, to present this agenda item.
Thank you, Shannon. Good afternoon, folks. Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, Board Liaison and Governance Specialist. I'd like to refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. If you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. Joining me for this presentation is Ryan Estriado, Director of Data Programs. So we'll begin this presentation with an overview of the revised advisory board recommendation process, highlighting key dates, the overall timeline, and the role of the member in the process. Ryan Estriado will conclude the presentation by providing some background information, updates to the 2025 proposal form, and highlighting some related resources for advisory board members and the public. So as established through statute, the Community Engagement Advisory Board is responsible for providing input and feedback to the governing board about whether the managing entity is creating strong feedback loops with data users, supporting evidence-based decision-making and analytical capacity, and ensuring equitable access to actionable information. As outlined in the governance manual, when there are significant gaps regarding the community engagement framework, the Community Engagement Advisory Board may develop recommendations for the governing board for ways to improve feedback loops with data users and ensure equitable access to actionable information. Provide professional development and technical assistance models that foster evidence-based decision-making, strengthening analytical capacity to use available data tools, and enable end users to understand structural factors that influence outcomes. Recommendations may also include communication structures that ensure a broad range of Californians know about and are using the tools and additional tools that will address strategic objectives for the data system. So earlier today, I introduced the advisory board recommendation process. I introduced the advisory board recommendation graphic displayed here in front of us and discussed the revisions made to the advisory board recommendation process. I'd like to uplift here that to assist members in following along, the printed graphic of this reference graphic is shared with you all. We'll now revisit this process, but with a focus on deadlines and responsibilities. Members will have also received a printout of Attachment A from the staff report, titled Community Engagement Proposal Process Member Responsibility, and this form outlines key member responsibilities and milestones in this year's recommendation process. So the intent behind this presentation is that advisory board members and the public can best prepare for key due dates and milestones in the 2025 process. So before we move forward to subsequent slides, I'd like to highlight the color coding system utilized. So the orange is going to be an indication of Community Engagement Advisory Board meetings. The green will mean a milestone. And finally, purple will relate to a member deadline. Next slide, please. So the 2025 Advisory Board recommendation process will begin today during our March 26th meeting. So highlighted there in yellow. So during this agenda item, Community Engagement Advisory Board members will have an opportunity to, 1, review and discuss the proposal forms. And afterwards, the proposal form as it is defined today will be made publicly available on the C2C website tomorrow, Thursday, March 27th, as identified there in green. At that time, members of the public or Data and Tools Advisory Board members may use the Community Engagement Proposal Form to submit their ideas. So we strongly encourage members of the public, and including our Data and Tools Advisory Board members, to review the posted proposal form once they go live. Now we're in May. As specified in the governance manual, all proposal forms from the public must be submitted to the office no later than Thursday, May 1st. I want to emphasize here that there are no exceptions to this deadline. Proposal forms from the public will then be reviewed by the office and added to the C2C website for global viewing by Thursday, May 8th. I want to highlight here that the office does retain the authority to screen out spam or inappropriate submissions as needed. July. So the Summer Joint Advisory Board meeting is scheduled for Friday, July 11th, and this is a virtual meeting. As a reminder, As a reminder to members and the public, the agenda and corresponding materials should be posted to the C2C website at least 2 weeks prior. As members prepare for the July 11th meeting, members should review proposal forms submitted by the public and be prepared to publicly discuss the public proposal forms received. For this meeting, I highly recommend that members take the opportunity to schedule a briefing with the office. Next slide, please. If a member will be submitting a proposal, they must do so no later than Friday, September 12th. So just as a kind reminder to members, members may choose to, 1, submit your own proposal. You may sponsor a proposal form that was received over the summer by the public, or further refine concepts from a form that was submitted. And in addition, members may choose to submit a joint proposal with up to 5 Community Engagement Advisory Board members. Members may submit a proposal form recommending feedback loops with data users, evidence-based decision-making, and analytical capacity, and equitable access to actionable information. The office will post all proposals. Next slide, please. The office will post all proposals submitted by Community Engagement Advisory Board members to the C2C website on Friday, October 10th. All members who submit a proposal will have an opportunity to meet with the office for a pre-meeting briefing between October 13th to October 17th prior to the fall meeting proposal presentation. And these dates are outlined there on the slide in purple. In preparation for the fall Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting on Friday, October 24th, members are expected to review all member proposals using the proposal rubric to examine potential impact and alignment with the C2C vision, mission, and authority. So again, as members prepare for the October 24th meeting, please consider meeting with the office for a briefing. At the Fall Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting, all members who submitted a proposal will have an opportunity to present their ideas to the Community Engagement Advisory Board. Again, I want to uplift this here that the presentation time for each proposal will be divided based on the number of proposals submitted to ensure the advisory board hears about all of the proposals. During this meeting, members will have the opportunity to discuss the ideas presented, and this will include discussing how different proposals may complement or contrast, and which proposals members find most promising for advancing C2C's ability to provide actionable information. In addition, the governing board's liaison to the Community Engagement Advisory Board, Member Nellam, will be in attendance to learn from the discussion. At the fall meeting, the office will be asking for 2 volunteers to work offline with the governing board liaison to draft the advisory board proposals report. Next slide, please. So a few things are going to happen, or several key milestones, I should say, will take place between fall 2025 and spring 2026. So let's start with the office. After the fall meeting, office staff will conduct a light touch feasibility study of all proposals. And Ryan Estrada will discuss in a little bit more detail about what that looks like. As for our proposal authors, you'll have an opportunity to review the office's light touch feasibility analysis, and you may choose to update or clarify your ideas based on the feasibility study. Finally, for our 2 volunteer advisory board members, you'll be responsible for working offline with the governing board liaison to draft the Community Engagement Advisory Board proposal report. Again, really emphasizing here that that report will have 3 distinct sections. 1, a link to all proposals. 2, all of the office's light touch feasibility studies. And 3, it will summarize the discussion at the fall meeting. So I just want to note here that while the office can offer some assistance with the report, ultimately the Community Engagement Advisory Board is responsible for drafting that complete report. Come spring, Community Engagement Advisory Board members will have an opportunity to review, discuss, and reflect on the draft report. The advisory board may choose to update the report based on the discussion at the spring meeting. The 2 Community Engagement Advisory Board members who drafted the report, in addition to the governing board liaison, will present the report to the governing board at the May 2026 meeting. The report may be used to inform the governing board's work and deliberation. I'd now like to hand it over to Ryan Estrellado to complete this presentation.
Thanks, Stephanie. The Education Code gives us guidance about the role of the Community Engagement Advisory Board, which is to explore whether the office creates strong feedback loops with data users, supports evidence-based decision-making, and creates equitable access to information. In general, that advice takes the form of amendments to the community engagement framework. Next slide. But how does an idea turn into advice for the governing board? That journey starts with the proposal process. Community engagement advisory board members can submit their own proposals, or they can sponsor one submitted by a member of the public. And 2 weeks before the fall Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting, the office posts all proposals on the C2C website. You have 2 forms to support this process. One is the proposal form itself, and the other is the rubric, which gives you a sense of what to shoot for in your proposals. After proposals are submitted, the office works on feasibility studies. In the previous procedure, the office conducted in-depth feasibility studies on up to 3 proposals that the advisory board voted on in the fall. In the new procedure, the one that we're in now, the office will conduct light touch feasibility studies on all proposals. And these light touch feasibility studies will answer questions like, previous slide, please. Thank you. What are the proposed actions for the office? What are the proposed actions for community engagement advisory board members? And finally, what are the proposed actions for other parties? And finally, there are more proposal resources for you to explore, but I will highlight the following. The first are detailed process descriptions in the governance manual. The second is the website page with an overview of the recommendation process. Third, the website page with C2C's strategic plan. Also on the website is the fourth one, the repository of past proposals and feasibility studies. And then finally, hosting a joint meeting of the advisory boards during the summer, which will give members an opportunity to ask the office specific questions and dedicated time to publicly discuss the ideation of recommendations received from the public. That concludes our presentation on this agenda item. I would like to hand it back to Shannon.
Thank you, Ryan and Stephanie. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Member Nguyen, you had a question during agenda item 6 regarding proposal process. Would you like to?
Yes, that's correct. Thanks for bringing that up. I just had a question regarding the light touch feasibility studies now that we've transitioned to this new proposal process. So I'm curious, what is missing as before? Obviously, it's shorter, as you can see, compared to last year's feasibility studies. But are we missing anything from it that's important? And if so, how has that been translated to this new one?
So what's missing, what is present in the in-depth feasibility studies that will not be present by default in the light touch feasibilities is the full analysis on for the community engagement advisory board proposals, a full analysis on relationship to the governance process, cost, both startup and ongoing, and then an analysis of risk to neutrality or other compliance related things. Instead, what the light touch feasibility does is it seeks to operationalize the proposal so that when the governing board looks at it, they have a better sense of what's imagined. And I should say, of course, that at that point, the governing board can request of the office to do a deeper analysis if that's useful for the decisions that they make about the annual work plan.
So what if members of the board would ask for a deeper analysis to make decision-making better? Would that be possible too?
Yeah, so the way that that would work in the new process is that would be included in the comments and reflections that that go with the summary report that eventually goes to the governing board.
I see. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much, Ryan. We are now going to pause for a 5-minute break, and we ask that you return promptly at 2:53 p.m. Thank you so much. We will now move on to agenda item 14, presentation on the advisory board's recommendation process outreach and communication strategy for public proposals. I would like to invite Angelique Palomar, C2C's Deputy Director of Communications, to present this item.
Thank you, Shannon. I believe I'm the last presentation of the day, so I'm going to round us out. Hopefully, I think hearing from the conversations and the recurring themes that I heard over the course of today's discussion, I think what a lot of this content will bring to the table is that it will resonate with everything that y'all have surfaced. All right, so hello again, Angelique Palomar, Deputy Director of Communications at Cradle-to-Career. I'd like to refer members to the staff report that was created for this agenda item. If you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. All right, so let's go into the goal. During this presentation, I will share information about C2C's outreach strategy to increase proposals from the public and outline ways for this advisory board to take part in promoting the process. A little background, according to the governance manual, when there are gaps with feedback loops with data users, the Community Engagement Advisory Board may make formal recommendations about C2C's community engagement framework. And it's important to underscore that as advisory board members, you're here to be a voice for all Californians and prioritize their needs. Starting in 2024, members of the public have been able to submit their own proposals, which members of this advisory board could sponsor. And last year, we did not receive any proposals from the public, but that's okay, because it was the first time that we had introduced this concept. And I think, again, a reoccurring theme from today's discussion is that we're on this journey of continuous improvement. As I said, the office is taking a holistic approach when it comes to outreach, and that is through continuous improvement for C2C's community engagement framework. So advisory board members can ensure continuous improvement and address gaps through the proposal process by urging their own respective networks to submit a proposal. The key questions to consider when sharing this proposal opportunity within your own respective networks include, do you have an idea that can improve feedback loops with data users? 2, does your idea share new information that foster professional development models to help evidence-based decision-making? And 3, what kind of communication structures will help broaden awareness of C2C's data tools with Californians across the state? All right, so public proposal outreach itself. The office's outreach strategy centers around a digital media approach that's designed to engage diverse audiences. This is where we can create ongoing conversations. Social media campaigns, we're utilizing our social media platforms to promote the public proposal window, share updates and key timelines. Through wide e-blast, we're planning for email campaign to our audiences that include educators, policymakers, researchers, advocates, students, and families. and through a dynamic web content. Our proposal landing page will serve as a one-stop shop for all information related to the proposal process for the public, including key dates, updates, and an archive of previous proposals. So that's our digital media approach. I'm excited to share a little bit more about our thoughts behind expanding C2C's virtual community conversations. In the last discussion, I think a lot of you all hit on this point. Community conversations are ideal for engaging with experts, sparking new ideas, receiving input from the public, and overall helping Californians understand how they can make sense of the resources available from C2C. So this is a lever that's central to our community engagement work, and we see an opportunity to take this even further this year. All right, so this slide kind of outlines how you all as community engagement advisory board members can participate in the promotion of the public proposal process. So the first is tied to our digital media strategy. We're seeking support from members to help amplify the public proposal opportunity through our social media campaigns and e-blasts. We'd love for you all to share this opportunity with your networks. If you're interested in taking part, please let us know during member discussion. And of course, as with all external communications opportunities that we provide, we will provide you all with media toolkits so that you can easily amplify, which will include captions, graphics, email language. So it's the promotion is seamless. All right, so on to the next opportunity for members to engage in is through the expansion of C2C's virtual community conversations. Whereas the digital engagement opportunity is directly tied to this year's proposal process, I want to take a step back that the expansion of C2C's virtual community conversations take a holistic approach and it focuses on the year-long effort. So we're not just talking about the public proposal this year, we're talking about public proposals this year, next year, and so forth. This is a continuous thing that we are doing yearly. So let's think about it in that sense. There are 16 of you all. There's 3 of us in the community, in the engagement and communications team. Member Gamboa, you mentioned earlier that you all have incredible networks that you can lean on. This is exactly what we're trying to do with the expansion of our community conversations. And I want to emphasize that you all are C2C's ambassadors and you're champions of Californians' interests. So the idea for expanding our virtual community conversations is simple. Every single one of you have your own networks, professional groups, and other stakeholders that you engage with, audiences that you engage with. You all also represent the interests of Californians, whether in the advocacy space, as a practitioner, community-based organization, in the school district setting, philanthropy, or in the workforce sector. So what are the expectations of members for this specific engagement opportunity? Advisory board members interested in this engagement opportunity would help identify possible speakers for a community conversation series. You would also help coordinate with C2C staff to finalize the recruitment. So this is a collaboration between you and us. You would play a key role in presenting new and relevant information to the data system, with the likelihood of reaching new audiences, but also tapping back into that idea that we're going back into the same space and revisiting communities that we've already spoken to. This idea of user-centered design, which is what C2C embodies. And with this expansion, we aim to, 1, increase participation by reaching new voices, tapping into new networks, and promoting further engagement. We also aim to promote thought leadership by creating a space to elevate new ideas and solutions that can inform policy and practice. And finally, we aim to build analytical capacity. We want to provide resources, training, and more discussions that help our audiences better interpret the use of data. We invite you all to take part in shaping this expansion. And this concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or take volunteers. Yeah.
Member Takagi, I would love to, if you have a toolkit, please send it my way. I'd love to uplift this work. I did have a question. I just would love to have this as an opportunity to uplift students and their voice and to potentially sponsor a student proposal. I was just wondering if there were any age limit or restrictions on who can submit proposals. I know that's been not a sticking point, but I know for like younger advisory board members, that's been a capacity issue. And I just wanted to see if there was anything.
No, there's no age limit. Varez?
Well, Member Takagi asked the first part of my question, so I'll follow up with the second one. We have an operational tool called californiacolleges.edu, and I'm wondering why we don't have the proposal process on there. And then I'm also just thinking about e-transcripts, if there's a way to connect that. I'm not aware enough about e-transcripts, like, platform and how, I know I use it, but I don't know if there was a place to hold that, but there definitely is on californiacolleges.edu. So
Clarifying the question, are you asking if we're using that tool to get the word out about it or seeking ideas about those tools?
get the word out. So that could be, so I had helped them create an HBCU ticker tape that went across when they were onboarding that information. So this, I'm just wondering if this is something that we could ask them to put on for the community, since they're at nearly 80% of the students.
We can be in touch with them and ask some questions of what's possible.
Member Johnson, I'm happy to volunteer for both items. I think I appreciate sort of the thoughtful expansion. The campaign ran a listening tour back in 2023, and I was the project manager going up and down the state, and that was virtual and in person. And so I know the capacity it takes to pull those things off. So I appreciate it, but also happy to sort of tap back into those networks and provide different regional and different types of speakers as well.
Member Gamboa, happy to also step up and volunteer on that and elevate this work. So good job.
Clarification for both opportunities on the social and digital media and also expansion of the community conversations. Great. Thank you.
Member Khosravi, I'll also volunteer for both.
Member Takagi, I just wanted to clarify volunteering for both as well.
Member Navarez volunteering for both.
Thank you. I'm excited for this collaboration in the next year.
You can make it 9, but I will just do for social media.
Right. I should be clear that the community conversations that I presented on, the expansion of it has to do with virtual community conversations. These are not in person. If that helps clarify or maybe.
Okay, so other than that,
piques your
I'll do
interest.
both.
Great.
Is
Yeah.
in-person completely out if you happen to be local?
For this specific strategy, we're aiming for virtual community conversations.
If you ever go in person, I'll be down still.
I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
What is your total now? 12, 13? I don't know. Yeah. Please add me for both as well.
I think at this point you should ask who's not volunteering. No pressure.
Again, this is all voluntary based. This is not you have to do it. This is, we all recognize that everyone is very busy. We also know that you have your own networks that we can lean on. This is not necessarily you providing the community conversation, but who in your network can you tap into that we can pull in and recruit?
All right, well, I appreciate that. It sounds like the engagement team has tripled, so that's very, very exciting. And with that, just thank you, Angelique.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will now move on to agenda item 15. This section is reserved for general public comment. At this time, we will open it up again to members of the public for general public comment. Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez, do we have anyone who would like to make a comment?
With no public commenters here in Sacramento, I am turning over to Zoom. For any interested individual participating via Zoom who wishes to make a public comment, please raise your hand at this time. Noting that there are no raised hands, I am closing public comment.
Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 16, future agenda items. During this agenda item, we will open it up to members followed by members of the public. At this time, folks can request items that they would like to see as future agenda items at upcoming meetings. So members, we will start with you. Member Navarez?
Now that CalKids had some data integration, I'd like to have them come back and explain that a little bit more in totality. And then I would really like it if someone could speak about the California Education Interagency Council. If we get some information about that council and legislation.
Any other future agenda items you would like to see? Yes. Okay. Stephanie, do we have anyone online who wishes to make a comment about future agenda items?
No commenters here in Sacramento. For individuals participating via Zoom, please raise your hand at this time if you would like to comment. Seeing no raised hands, I will close public comment at this time.
Thank you. We will now move on to our final agenda item of the day, adjournment. Oh,
My apologies. I know that we spoke about CalKids, but would it also be possible to ask about CalAble and the Hope program?
thank you for clarifying. All right. So thank you to everyone who joined us here today, specifically our Community Engagement Advisory Board members, the entire C2C team, and the public for the invaluable input and support you provided today. Our achievements are the result of collective collaboration, and your ongoing support has been invaluable to our success. Our next public meeting will be our Governing Board meeting on Friday, May 9th, and that meeting will be a hybrid meeting with a physical location here in Sacramento, and we will be asking all members to join us in person. Members of the public will have an opportunity to join these meetings in person or virtually via Zoom. And for more information, you can find that forthcoming on the C2C website. So I would now like to adjourn the meeting at 3:13 p.m. Thank you all.
Thank you.